The gunshot jolted Samuel Holloway from sleep, his hand already reaching for the Colt Army revolver he kept beside his bed before his eyes were fully open. He lay still in the darkness listening. The walls of his cabin creaked against the night wind, but no second shot followed. Perhaps it had been a dream, one of the many that had haunted him since Tennessee. Or maybe just a hunter in the hills, though midnight seemed an odd hour for hunting anything except ghosts. Sam swung his legs over the side of the bed, the floorboards cold beneath his bare feet. At 55, his body carried more aches than it once had, but 11 years after the war, he could still move quietly when needed. He pulled on his trousers and shirt, tucking the revolver into his waistband as he moved to the window. The Arizona Territory stretched before him, bathed in pale moonlight. His cabin sat alone on a small rise, giving him a clear view of the approach. One of the reasons he'd chosen this spot after drifting west. Hard to be surprised here. Hard for the past to sneak up on him. The sound came again, not a gunshot this time, but something closer to a scream, distant and carried on the wind. Sam's jaw tightened. He'd heard screams like that before in burning villages and field hospitals. "Not your concern," he muttered to himself, reaching for the bottle of whiskey on his bedside table. The amber liquid glinted in the moonlight as he poured a measure into a dirty glass. "Not anymore." But even as he raised the glass to his lips, he set it down untouched. With a sigh that held 11 years of weariness, Sam pulled on his boots, grabbed his shotgun from beside the door, and stepped out into the night. The air was cool against his face, carrying the scent of sage and dust. Spring came late to this part of Arizona, and the night still held winter's bite. Sam moved carefully down from his porch, scanning the horizon. There, a flicker of torchlight in the distance, moving across the desert floor like fireflies. Men on horseback from the way the lights bobbed. 5, maybe 6 of them heading north along the old cattle trail. Sam squinted, raising a hand to shield his eyes from the moon's glare. Something else caught his attention, a smaller shadow moving perpendicular to the riders, stumbling across the hard pan toward his cabin. A figure on foot, moving with the desperate gait of prey. "Damn it all," Sam muttered, torn between caution and the instinct that had once made him a good officer, the need to protect. He'd come west to escape such choices, to live alone with his memories and his guilt. The last thing he needed was trouble. The memory came unbidden, Margaret's face streaked with ash, screaming for their daughter as flames consumed their home. Sam closed his eyes against it, but the image remained burned into his mind as surely as Tennessee was burned into his soul. When he opened them again, he'd made his decision. Sam retreated to his cabin, barred the door, and poured himself that drink. Whatever drama was playing out in the desert tonight, it wasn't his fight. He'd had enough of other people's wars. An hour passed, the whiskey bottle stood half empty, and the riders had disappeared over the northern ridge. Sam sat in his rocking chair, staring at the dying embers in his fireplace, trying to convince himself he'd made the right choice. The knock, when it came, was so faint he almost missed it. More a soft thud against the wood than a deliberate signal. Sam tensed his hand, moving to the revolver at his waist. "Who's there?" he called, his voice rough from disuse and whiskey. No answer came, just another weak thump against the door. Sam stood, moving silently to the window to peer out. The shotgun remained within reach on the table beside him. A woman stood on his porch, though "stood" was perhaps too generous a term. She leaned heavily against the doorframe, her body trembling with exhaustion. Moonlight illuminated her blonde hair, hanging in tangled, dirty strands around a face too pale in the silvery light. Her dress, what remained of it, might once have been white, but was now torn and stained dark in places that could only be blood. Sam hesitated, his instincts warring. She was clearly in trouble, but trouble had a way of multiplying once you let it in your door. He'd learned that lesson the hard way. "Mr. The woman's voice came weakly through the door. "Please." Something in her tone, desperation mingled with a dignity that refused to beg, made his decision for him. Sam unbarred the door and pulled it open, shotgun held at his side, ready but not threatening. The woman raised her head, revealing a face that might have been beautiful before fear and exhaustion had hollowed her cheeks and darkened her eyes. Those eyes, blue as a summer sky, met his with a strange, distant resignation. "I'm not clean anymore," she whispered, the words barely audible as they slipped past her cracked lips. Then her eyes rolled back and she collapsed forward. Sam dropped the shotgun and caught her before she hit the floor, surprised by how light she felt in his arms. Up close, he could see the bruises forming on her skin, the tear in her gown that exposed her shoulder, and back marked with what looked like belt welts. For a brief moment, he was back on a battlefield in Tennessee, holding another broken body. He pushed the memory away and carried the unconscious woman to his bed, the only proper place for someone in her condition. As he laid her down, he noticed the intricate lacework at the collar of her ruined dress, a wedding gown he realized with a jolt. What kind of wedding night ended with a bride fleeing barefoot across the desert, beaten and bloodied? Sam retrieved his medical kit, a remnant from his army days, that had seen more use than he cared to remember. With practiced hands, he cleaned and bandaged her feet first, then the other visible wounds. He worked in silence, his weathered face betraying no emotion. This wasn't the first time he'd tended wounds. It wasn't even the first time he'd tended wounds on someone who'd clearly been beaten. The war had shown him the worst of what men could do to each other, and the years after hadn't proven much better. When he finished, Sam covered her with a blanket and retreated to his rocking chair in the front room. He didn't know who she was running from, but he had a feeling they wouldn't be far behind. He retrieved his shotgun from where it had fallen and checked that it was loaded. Then he settled into his chair and waited for dawn, a decision already forming in his mind that would change everything. The desert night faded slowly, stars giving way to the first pink streaks of dawn. Sam remained in his chair, watching through the window as the landscape transformed from silver to gold. He dozed occasionally but never fully slept, too aware of the woman in his bed and what her presence might bring down upon them both. A sound from the bedroom drew his attention. Movement, a soft gasp. Sam rose, moving quietly to check on his unexpected guest. She was awake, her blue eyes wide with momentary panic as she tried to make sense of unfamiliar surroundings. "You're safe," Sam said from the doorway, keeping his distance to avoid frightening her further. For now, at least. She startled at his voice, pushing herself up against the headboard before wincing as the movement pulled at her injuries. Recognition dawned in her eyes as she remembered the night before. "You helped me," she said, her voice stronger than it had been, but still carrying the rasp of thirst. Sam nodded once, then moved to pour water from a pitcher into a tin cup. He approached slowly, offering it to her at arm's length. "Small sips," he advised. "Too much at once will make you sick." She obeyed, drinking, carefully studying him over the rim of the cup. When she'd had enough, she lowered it to her lap, her fingers tracing the dents in the metal. "I'm Eleanor Mason," she said finally, raising her eyes to meet his. "Most people call me Ellie." "Samuel Holloway," he replied. "Sam will do." A silence stretched between them, neither quite ready to address the obvious questions. Sam broke it first, nodding toward her bandaged feet. "Those will heal clean if you stay off them for a few days. The rest?" He gestured vaguely to her other injuries. "Nothing permanent." Ellie nodded, clutching the blanket tighter around herself, as if suddenly aware of her state of undress beneath the oversized shirt he'd put on her, one of his own. The only clean garment he had that would cover her decently. "Thank you," she said. "I didn't know if—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "I didn't know if anyone would help." "I nearly didn't," Sam admitted, seeing no point in pretense. "Man who lives alone out here generally prefers to keep trouble at a distance." "And I'm trouble," Ellie said, a statement rather than a question. Sam's mouth twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "That much was clear when you collapsed on my doorstep in a wedding dress more blood than lace." He saw her flinch at the mention of the dress and immediately regretted his bluntness. 11 years of minimal human contact had dulled whatever social graces he'd once possessed. "I should go," Ellie said suddenly, attempting to rise despite her injuries. "They'll be looking for me, and when they find me here—" Sam interrupted, though he could guess. "Who exactly is looking for you, Miss Mason?" She hesitated, sinking back onto the bed as her strength failed her. "My husband." The words seemed to stick in her throat. "Victor Caldwell." The name hit Sam like a physical blow, and he was grateful he'd already set down the water pitcher, or he might have dropped it. He kept his face carefully neutral, but his mind raced with implications. "Victor Caldwell," he repeated slowly. "The rancher." Ellie nodded, watching his reaction closely. "You know him, Of him," Sam replied carefully. "Man owns half the county now. Hard to avoid hearing the name." What he didn't say was that he knew far more about Victor Caldwell than just his status as a wealthy landowner. The name had haunted Sam's nightmares for 11 years, alongside the screams of the dying at Willow Creek. Before he could decide how much to reveal, a new sound caught his attention, hoofbeats approaching from the east. Sam moved quickly to the window, peering through the worn curtain. Riders, he said tersely. 3 of them, coming fast. Ellie's face drained of what little color it had regained. Caldwell's men! Her voice shook with certainty. They found me. Sam made a decision, then one that would set in motion events he couldn't begin to foresee. He moved to the bed, helping Ellie to her feet despite her gasp of pain. There's a cellar under the floorboards in the pantry, he said, guiding her across the room. Stay there no matter what you hear. Don't make a sound. What will you do? She asked as he lifted a trap door hidden beneath a worn rug. Sam helped her down the rough wooden steps. Whatever's necessary. The cellar was little more than a root storage space dug out of the hard earth and reinforced with timber supports. It smelled of dust and preserved vegetables, but it was solid and, more importantly, hidden. Wait, Ellie caught his arm as he prepared to close the trap door. Why are you helping me? You don't know me. Sam paused, considering the question. Why indeed the wise course would be to hand her over, avoid making an enemy of the most powerful man in the territory. But wisdom had never been his strong suit, especially when it came to Victor Caldwell. Let's just say I'm not fond of men who beat women, he said finally, especially on their wedding night. He closed the trap door and replaced the rug just as the riders pulled up outside his cabin. Sam checked his revolver, tucked it back into his waistband, and moved to the door, shotgun in hand. The man who sat astride the lead horse was tall and lean, with a face weathered by sun and wind. He wore the clothes of a ranch foreman, good quality but practical, and the gun on his hip had seen use. His eyes, cold and assessing, took in Sam and the cabin behind him in one practiced sweep. Help you with something, Sam called, his voice carrying across the morning air. Looking for a woman, the man replied. Blonde, about 20, ran off from Mr. Caldwell's ranch last night. Haven't seen anyone matching that description, Sam said evenly. The man's eyes narrowed. Mind if we take a look around? Mr. Caldwell's mighty concerned about his wife's safety. I do mind, Sam replied, still casual but with a new edge to his voice. This is my property, and you're not welcome to search it. The lead rider stiffened. You calling me a liar, old man? I'm saying that if a woman ran from Caldwell on her wedding night, might be she had good reason. Sam shifted slightly, and though his shotgun remained pointed down, the movement served as a reminder of its presence. And if she did, I'd respect her decision. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. The rider stared at Sam for a long moment, then spat into the dirt. Caldwell won't forget this. Neither will I, Sam replied quietly. For a second, it seemed the rider might press the issue. His hand hovered near his sidearm, and his companion shifted uneasily. But something in Sam's steady gaze must have given him pause. We'll be back, he finally said, wheeling his horse around, with more men. I'll be here, Sam assured him. They watched in silence as the riders galloped away, dust billowing behind them. Only when they were specks on the horizon did Sam lower his shotgun and turn back toward the cabin. He removed the rug and opened the trap door, finding Ellie huddled in the corner of the cellar, her face pale with fear. They're gone, he said, helping her climb out. For now. They'll be back, she said, echoing the rider's warning. Frank Matthews doesn't make idle threats. You know him, Sam asked, guiding her to a chair at his small kitchen table. He's Caldwell's foreman. Has been since before I was married. Ellie sank into the chair, wincing as she adjusted her position. He was there last night when Caldwell... She trailed off, unable to finish. Sam busied himself making coffee, giving her a moment to compose herself. When he placed a steaming cup before her, she looked up with gratitude mixed with confusion. Why did he call you old man? She asked unexpectedly. You're not that old. The question caught Sam off guard, and a short laugh escaped him, rusty from disuse. In these parts, anyone over 40 with gray in their beard qualifies as ancient. He knew you, though, Ellie pressed, the way he looked at you, like he recognized you. Sam's expression closed again as he took a seat across from her. Might have seen me in town once or twice. Ellie shook her head slightly. No, it was more than that. And you knew him, too. I could tell. Sam regarded her thoughtfully. For a woman who'd been through hell, she was remarkably perceptive. That might prove either very useful or very dangerous in the days ahead. Why did you run Miss Mason? He asked, changing the subject. What happened last night? Ellie's hands tightened around her coffee cup. I was married yesterday afternoon. She began, her voice distant. Not by choice. My father, he had gambling debts. Caldwell offered to clear them in exchange for my hand. Your father agreed to this. Sam couldn't keep the disgust from his voice. He didn't see that he had a choice. Neither did I. Ellie's eyes remained fixed on the table. The ceremony was brief. Afterward, there was a small reception at Caldwell's ranch. When night fell, he took me to his bedroom. She fell silent and Sam didn't press her. The belt welts on her back told enough of the story. I waited until he fell asleep, she continued finally. Took a knife from the dinner tray, cut away my bindings and ran. I didn't know where I was going. Just away. Sam stood abruptly, moved by a surge of anger he hadn't felt in years. He paced to the window, looking out at the desert as he fought to control his emotions. You did what you had to do, he said at last, his back still to her. No one should fault you for that. Caldwell will do more than fault me, Ellie said softly. He'll kill me, or worse. Sam turned to face her, his decision made. Not if I have anything to say about it. Before Ellie could respond, the sound of an approaching horse caught their attention again. Sam moved quickly to the window, tension visible in the set of his shoulders, but then relaxed slightly. It's all right, he said. Just the preacher. He opened the door as an elderly man with snow-white hair dismounted from a dappled mare. The newcomer wore a black coat and the white collar of his profession, though both showed signs of hard travel and harder years. Morning, Reverend, Sam called. Sam, the older man replied with a nod, brought your supplies from town. His eyes moved past Sam to where Ellie sat at the table, and his bushy white eyebrows rose in surprise. I see you have company. This is Miss Eleanor Mason, Sam said, emphasizing the miss slightly. She's seeking sanctuary. Understanding dawned in the preacher's eyes. The whole town's talking about nothing else this morning. Caldwell's men are everywhere, turning over every rock. Sam ushered him inside, closing the door firmly behind him. Reverend Joseph Parker, he introduced to Ellie, brings supplies once a week and more gossip than I know what to do with. Despite the attempt at lightness, Parker's expression remained grave as he set a bundle of supplies on the table and took a seat. It's worse than you might think, he said quietly. Caldwell's offering $100 for information on your whereabouts, Miss Mason. A substantial sum in these parts. Ellie paled but nodded, accepting this news with the same resigned dignity Sam had noticed earlier. There's more, Parker continued, looking now at Sam. Folks in town are saying Caldwell himself is taking a particular interest in this search. He's hired men from as far as Tucson professionals. A heavy silence fell over the cabin. Sam poured coffee for Parker, his movements deliberately calm despite the churning in his gut. Why would Caldwell go to such lengths for a runaway bride? He asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Parker glanced between them, weighing his words. There are rumors, he said slowly, that this marriage wasn't just about settling a gambling debt, that Mason had something on Caldwell, something worth more than money. Ellie looked up sharply. What are you talking about? My father was a drunk and a gambler who sold his daughter to clear his debts. What could he possibly have had on someone like Caldwell? I don't know, Parker admitted. But Caldwell isn't just a wealthy rancher, Miss Mason. He has a past he doesn't discuss, a past that includes the war. Sam's hand tightened around his coffee cup. What about the war? Parker met Sam's gaze steadily. Victor Caldwell was Captain Caldwell of the Confederate Army, 5th Tennessee Cavalry. The silence that followed held a different quality, heavy with something Ellie couldn't identify. She looked between the two men, sensing currents of meaning she couldn't decipher. I know the name, Sam finally said, his voice colder than Ellie had yet heard it. His unit was responsible for burning a village in Tennessee in '64. Parker continued quietly. Women and children inside. The same, Parker confirmed with a grim nod. After the war, he disappeared for a few years, then resurfaced out here with more money than a captain's pay could explain, and a past he doesn't discuss. Ellie's heart pounded in her chest. She knew Caldwell had fought in the war. He'd displayed his uniform and saber prominently in his study, but he'd never spoken of his actions. She thought of the cold precision with which he'd hurt her on their wedding night, the lack of emotion in his eyes, and shivered. Why are you telling me this, Joseph? Sam asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. Because I know you, Sam Holloway, Parker replied quietly. I know what you did in the war and what you've been trying to do since. And I know that if that girl found her way to your door, you'd take her in without question. Another silence. She's inside, Sam finally admitted. Found her on my doorstep last night, half dead. Then God guided her steps, Parker said. But you need to be careful. Caldwell isn't a man who loses gracefully, and he's got the sheriff in his pocket. Wouldn't be the first time I've dealt with corrupt authority, Sam replied. Or men who think they're above the law. Their voices lowered then, and Ellie strained to hear the rest of their conversation. The name Tennessee surfaced again along with Willow Creek, but the context eluded her. When Parker finally rose to leave, his expression was solemn. I'll do what I can to misdirect attention, he promised, but be prepared. This won't end quietly. After the preacher had gone, Sam remained at the window watching until the dust from Parker's horse had settled. When he turned back to Ellie, his face was set with a determination that transformed him, making him appear younger and somehow more dangerous. There are things you need to know, he said, taking a seat across from her. Things about me, about Caldwell, about why helping you is more complicated than you might think. Ellie steeled herself. I'm listening. Sam took a deep breath as if preparing to lift a great weight. 11 years ago, I was Major Samuel Holloway of the Union Army stationed in eastern Tennessee. In April 1864, I received intelligence about a Confederate supply depot near Whitfield Creek and ordered an attack. He paused, the memory clearly painful. The intelligence was wrong. What we thought was a supply depot was actually a forward camp of the 5th Tennessee Cavalry Caldwell's unit. We attacked at dawn, caught them by surprise. Heavy casualties on both sides. Understanding began to dawn on Ellie. And afterward, Sam continued, his voice hollow, Caldwell's men burned Willow Creek Village in retaliation. 37 civilians dead. Women, children. I saw the bodies myself when we counterattacked. Arranged proper burial. Ellie sat very still, absorbing this revelation. So when Matthews called you old man, he recognized me, Sam confirmed, just as I recognized him. He was a sergeant under Caldwell back then, one of the men who likely carried out the massacre. And Caldwell blames you, Ellie said, the pieces falling into place, for the attack on his men. Sam's laugh was bitter and brief. Caldwell blames everyone but himself, always has. He met her gaze directly. But now you understand why helping you isn't simply a matter of common decency. Why Caldwell will come at me with everything he has once he confirms you're here. I should leave, Ellie said immediately. I've brought danger to your door. You'll never make it alone, Sam cut her off. Not with your injuries, not with Caldwell's men scouring every inch between here and the territorial border. Then what do we do? Sam's expression hardened with resolve. We find out what your father knew that was worth marrying you for. We find proof of Caldwell's crimes past and present, and we use it to ensure he never hurts anyone again. Outside, the sun climbed higher in the Arizona sky, casting stark shadows across the landscape. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals with effortless grace, its sharp eyes missing nothing below. And miles away, in a sprawling ranch house surrounded by armed men, Victor Caldwell listened to Frank Matthews' report with growing rage, his scarred face twisting into an expression that had once made hardened soldiers tremble. Holloway, he repeated the name like poison on his tongue. You're certain? Matthews nodded grimly. No doubt, Captain. It's him. Caldwell's fist came down on his desk with enough force to rattle the inkwell. After all these years, his eyes cold as a winter river fixed on Matthews. Gather the men. All of them. This ends now. Matthews hesitated. The girl, sir, your wife. A smile spread across Caldwell's face, devoid of warmth or mercy. She's made her choice, Frank. Now she'll learn what happens to those who stand against me. He turned to gaze at the saber mounted on his wall, a relic from another time. They both will. Morning light streamed through the cabin windows as Sam laid out his Winchester rifle, revolver, and shotgun on the kitchen table. His movements were methodical as he cleaned each weapon, the routine familiar after decades of practice. Across from him, Ellie watched with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. You know how to shoot? Sam asked without looking up, his hands working the cleaning rod through the Winchester's barrel. No, Ellie replied. My father never allowed guns in our home, said they were too tempting when the drink was upon him. Sam nodded, acknowledging the wisdom in that at least. That'll have to change. Caldwell won't give up easily, and I can't be everywhere at once. 2 days had passed since Ellie's arrival. Her feet were healing well enough for her to move around the cabin, though not without discomfort. The bruises on her face had deepened to purple before beginning to fade to yellow at the edges. Sam had given her one of his old shirts and a pair of trousers that he'd taken in with surprisingly deft needlework. "You sew?" she'd asked with genuine surprise when he presented the altered clothes. "Army teaches a man to mend what needs mending," he'd replied with a shrug. "Clothes wounds, fences, all the same in the end." Now he set aside the rifle and picked up the Colt revolver, a weapon that seemed to fit his hand as if it had grown there. "We'll start with this," he said, checking that it was unloaded before passing it to her. "Lighter than the rifle. Better for someone your size." Ellie took the weapon gingerly, surprised by its weight despite Sam's assurance. "It's heavy." "That's good," Sam said. "Reminds you it's not a toy." He showed her how to hold it, how to aim, how to account for the kick when firing. His instructions were clear and patient, revealing the officer he had once been. "I don't know if I could actually shoot someone," Ellie admitted as she aimed at an imaginary target on the cabin wall. Sam's expression hardened. "When the moment comes, and it will come, hesitation will get you killed." He took the revolver back, his eyes distant. "Men like Caldwell count on hesitation. They prey on it." Something in his tone made Ellie study him more closely. "You've killed before, not just in the war." It wasn't a question, but Sam answered anyway. "Yes." He offered no explanation, no justification, and Ellie didn't press for one. Some questions were better left unasked. The sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted their lesson. Sam moved swiftly to the window, the Colt now loaded and ready in his hand. His shoulders relaxed slightly when he recognized the rider. "Parker," he said, tucking the revolver into his waistband before opening the door. The preacher looked more haggard than he had 2 days before, his face lined with fatigue and concern. He dismounted stiffly, leading his mare to the water trough beside the cabin. "Brought news," he said, without preamble as he entered, nodding a greeting to Ellie. "None of it good, I'm afraid." Sam poured coffee while Parker settled at the table, his old bones creaking audibly as he sat. "Caldwell's offering a reward for information on your whereabouts, Miss Mason. A substantial one. And he's hired additional men, not just ranch hands, but professionals, gunmen." Ellie's stomach tightened with fear. "Has anyone talked about seeing me?" Parker shook his head. "Not that I know of, but money has a way of loosening tongues, and $100 is more than most folk around here see in a year." Sam's expression hardened. "So it's escalating." "I'm afraid so." Parker hesitated, then added, "And there's more. I did some digging, asked some discreet questions about Preston Mason." Ellie leaned forward. "My father, what did you find?" "He's dead, Miss Mason." Parker's voice was gentle but direct. "Found hanging in Caldwell's private jail 3 days ago. The official story is suicide, but no one believes that," Sam finished for him. "No." Parker looked at Ellie with compassion. "I'm truly sorry for your loss." Ellie sat very still, the news washing over her like cold water. She had suspected, of course, her father wouldn't have simply let her go, not after arranging the marriage. But hearing it confirmed was different. "Did he suffer?" she asked quietly. Parker hesitated. "I don't know, child. I pray not." Ellie nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Her father had been a deeply flawed man, especially in his final years. But he had also been the one who taught her to read, who had once sat up all night with her when she had scarlet fever, who had treasured her mother's memory in his own broken way. And now he was gone, another victim of Victor Caldwell. "There's one more thing," Parker said, after giving her a moment to absorb the news. "In my inquiries, I heard rumors about your father's movements in the weeks before his death. He was seen frequently at a mining claim outside of town, an abandoned silver mine that no one's worked in years." Sam's eyebrows rose. "You think he hid something there?" "It's possible," Parker allowed. "The mine was originally owned by Caldwell's partner, a man named Hargrove, who died under suspicious circumstances last year. The claim reverted to Caldwell afterward. So if my father found something incriminating against Caldwell," Ellie said slowly, "the mine would be a logical place to hide it." "It would explain why Caldwell is so desperate to find you," Sam agreed. "He thinks you know where it is." Ellie shook her head. "But I don't. My father never mentioned any mine to me." "Are you certain?" Parker pressed gently. "Perhaps not directly, but a hint. a reference that might make sense in retrospect. Ellie searched her memory, trying to recall any unusual comments or behaviors from her father in those final weeks. He had been nervous, yes, but also strangely elated at times, as if he held a winning card he couldn't yet play. He did say something strange the day before he told me about the marriage, she said slowly. He said our fortunes were about to change, that he'd found a treasure map that would lead us to a new life. She had assumed it was the liquor talking another of his grand, empty promises. A map, Sam repeated thoughtfully. Not necessarily literal. Or perhaps exactly literal, Parker suggested. If Preston found documentation of Caldwell's war crimes, that would indeed be a treasure of sorts, leverage that could force Caldwell to leave you both alone, maybe even pay handsomely for the document's return. But then why arrange my marriage to Caldwell? Ellie asked, confusion evident in her voice. If he had leverage, why not use it? Sam and Parker exchanged a look. Perhaps he tried, Sam said quietly, and it backfired. The implication hung heavy in the air. Had her father attempted to blackmail Caldwell only to find himself outmaneuvered? Had he offered Ellie in marriage as a desperate last attempt to save himself? The thought made her sick. There is something hidden in that mine, Parker said, breaking the uncomfortable silence. Caldwell will tear it apart looking for it, but he hasn't yet, which suggests he's not certain. He needs you, Miss Mason, to confirm his suspicions, or to reveal the location. Ellie felt trapped, the walls closing in again. What do we do? Sam's expression was grim but determined. We find whatever your father hid before Caldwell does. It's our only leverage. And how do we do that? Ellie asked. I don't know where to look. But you might recognize it when you see it, Parker pointed out. Something your father left behind. A clue that would mean nothing to Caldwell, but might speak to you. It was a slim hope, but it was all they had. Ellie nodded slowly. I'll try. As Parker prepared to leave, he pulled Sam aside for a private word. Ellie couldn't hear what was said, but she saw Sam's expression darken, his jaw tightening. When the preacher was gone, Sam returned to the cabin, his movements more tense than before. What is it? Ellie asked. What did he tell you? Sam hesitated, clearly debating how much to share. Parker's heard rumors in town, he finally said. Caldwell's men have been asking specific questions about me. A chill ran through Ellie. What kind of questions? About my military service, my time in Tennessee during the war. Sam's voice was carefully neutral, but Ellie could sense the underlying tension. It seems Caldwell has connected the dots. Connected what dots? Ellie asked, though a part of her already knew the answer. Sam's gray eyes met hers directly. That I was there, Miss Mason. I was in Tennessee in '64. In fact, I was the officer who ordered the attack on Caldwell's unit, the attack that led him to burn that village in retaliation. The revelation landed like a physical blow. Ellie stared at him, struggling to reconcile this new information with the man who had shown her nothing but kindness. She began, then stopped, unsure what to say. I didn't know there were civilians in the area, Sam continued, his voice low and even. Intelligence reports indicated it was a military target only. By the time I learned the truth, it was too late. The damage was done. Ellie swallowed hard. In the village, the one Caldwell burned. Pain flashed across Sam's features, quickly controlled. 37 dead. Women and children, mostly some old men. The able-bodied men were away fighting. He paused. I led the burial detail myself, made sure each one had a proper grave and marker with their name. It was the least I could do. The room fell silent, the weight of history pressing down on them both. Ellie thought of her mother, who had grown up in Tennessee, who had never spoken of the war except to say it had taken too much from too many. So, Caldwell isn't just after me, she said finally. He's after you too, for revenge. It appears so, Sam agreed grimly, which means our situation is even more precarious than we thought. Caldwell won't just want to capture us now, he'll want to destroy us both. The revelation should have terrified her. Instead, Ellie felt a strange calm settle over her. The pieces were falling into place, her father's mysterious behavior. Caldwell's insistence on marriage rather than simply collecting his debt, the intensity of the hunt now underway. This wasn't just about her, or even about whatever secrets her father might have hidden. This was about a decade-old vendetta, a cycle of violence and retribution that had begun during the war and continued to claim victims even now. And somehow, through fate or providence, she had landed in the middle of it. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice steadier than she expected. Sam studied her for a long moment as if reassessing her in light of her reaction. "We prepare," he said finally, "and we look for whatever your father hid. It's our only chance to end this." The rest of the day was spent in preparation. Sam brought out extra ammunition, showing Ellie how to load the revolver, explaining the difference between various calibers. He checked and rechecked his rifles, cleaned his knives, and repacked his medical kit with fresh bandages and salves. As evening approached, Sam surprised Ellie by suggesting they ride out to watch the sunset from a nearby mesa. "Might be our last chance for a while," he said, his tone making it clear he expected trouble soon. They rode in silence, Ellie now comfortable enough on Sam's mare Willow to keep pace with his gelding. The desert was beautiful in the fading light, the rocks and cacti casting long shadows across the sand. When they reached the mesa, they dismounted, leaving the horses ground-tied nearby. The view was spectacular, miles of desert stretching to the horizon, painted in hues of gold, crimson and purple as the sun sank lower. In the distance, mountains rose like sentinels against the darkening sky. "It's beautiful," Ellie said softly. "It is," Sam agreed. "When I first came here, I didn't see the beauty, was too lost in my own darkness. But gradually it worked its way in. The light, the space, the silence. It heals something in a man if he lets it." Ellie glanced at him, noting the relaxed set of his shoulders, the peacefulness in his expression as he gazed at the horizon. In this moment, he seemed unburdened by the ghost that usually accompanied him. "Sam," she said hesitantly, "may I ask you something personal?" He turned to her, one eyebrow raised slightly. "Of course. Parker mentioned something about your family. I saw a photograph in your cabin, but you never spoke of them." Sam was quiet for a long moment, his eyes returning to the horizon. "I was married when I went to war," he finally said. "Margaret and our daughter Sarah lived on a small farm in Illinois. After what happened in Tennessee after the war ended, I went home to them. But I was changed. The man who returned wasn't the same one who had left." Ellie could imagine it all too easily, the haunted soldier returning to a life that no longer fit, carrying burdens his family couldn't understand. "What happened?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer wouldn't be happy. "I started drinking," Sam said simply. "Not unusual for veterans, especially officers who carried the weight of command. I tried to adjust to civilian life, but the nightmares, the memories, they followed me home." Sam looked away, his gaze fixed on something only he could see. "One night there was a fire. I had fallen asleep with a lit cigar after drinking heavily. I managed to get out, but Margaret and Sarah—" His voice trailed off. "They didn't," Ellie finished softly. "No." Sam's eyes, when they returned to her, were filled with an old sorrow. "I've carried that guilt ever since. Came west afterward trying to outrun my memories. Ended up here where Parker found me half dead from exposure and alcohol. Nursed me back to health, helped me build this place." Ellie sat in stunned silence, trying to reconcile this new information with the stoic, capable man she had come to know. Sam Holloway, who moved through life with such careful control, had once lost everything to a moment's carelessness. It explains so much: his solitude, his reticence, the shadows that sometimes crossed his face when he thought no one was looking. "Does Parker know you've told me this?" she asked finally. "No," Sam admitted, "and he may not thank me for it, but you needed to know, especially now." "Why especially now?" Sam leaned forward, his expression grave. "Because Caldwell has learned about Margaret and Sarah. His men were asking specific questions about the fire, about my role in it." Cold dread settled in Ellie's stomach. "He's going to use it against you somehow." "I believe so," Sam agreed. "Caldwell is a man who understands how to inflict maximum pain. Physical violence is just one tool in his arsenal. Psychological torture is another." As they rode back to the cabin in the gathering dusk, Ellie pondered Sam's revelations. The man beside her carried wounds far deeper than she had imagined. Guilt not just for the actions of war, but for the most personal of tragedies. Yet he had survived, had rebuilt something from the ashes of his former life. This homestead, this purpose, it might be a solitary existence, but it was not without meaning. And now he was willing to risk even that to help her to face a demon from his past who threatened them both. The night passed quietly, but Sam's vigilance never wavered. He slept in short intervals, always returning to the window to scan the horizon for approaching riders. Ellie dozed on his bed, waking often from nightmares in which Caldwell's face loomed over her, his hands tightening around her throat. During one such awakening, she found Sam seated at the kitchen table, a leather-bound book open before him. He wrote by lamplight, his hand moving steadily across the page. His journal, she realized, recording events, or perhaps working through his thoughts. She watched him for a moment, struck by the solemnity of his profile in the golden light, before closing her eyes again and drifting back to uneasy sleep. Morning came too soon. Sam was already up preparing a simple breakfast of cornbread and coffee when Ellie emerged from the bedroom, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "We need to search your things," Sam said without preamble as he set a plate before her. "Your wedding dress, anything you brought with you. Your father might have hidden a clue there." Ellie nodded, her appetite suddenly diminished. The tattered remains of her wedding gown hung in the small closet where Sam had placed them after tending her wounds. She had avoided looking at the garment, wanting nothing more than to burn it in the memories it contained. But now it might hold the key to their survival. After breakfast, she retrieved the dress, laying it carefully on the table. The once beautiful fabric was torn and stained, the lace collar ripped where Caldwell had grabbed her. Sam examined it methodically, checking seams and pockets with careful fingers. "Nothing unusual in the construction," he said finally. "No hidden compartments or messages that I can see." Ellie sighed, disappointed but not surprised. "There's nothing else. I didn't exactly pack a bag before fleeing." "What about personal items?" Sam pressed. "Jewelry, a locket, anything your father might have given you before the wedding?" Ellie was about to shake her head when she remembered. "There was a handkerchief. My mother's. It had our family crest embroidered on it. I kept it in the pocket of my dress for—" She paused, embarrassed by the sentimentality. "For courage." Sam immediately checked the pockets again, finding the small square of white linen still tucked in the right one. He spread it on the table, examining the delicate embroidery, a simple design of crossed wheat sheaves and a rising sun. "The Mason family crest?" he asked, studying the pattern. "Yes," Ellie confirmed. "My mother was very proud of her heritage. This handkerchief was one of the few things of hers I had left." Parker, who had arrived just as they were beginning their examination, leaned closer to inspect the embroidery. His eyes widened in recognition. "This embroidery," he said slowly, "this is the Mason family crest, isn't it?" Ellie nodded, confused by his reaction. "Yes, it was my mother's." Parker turned to Sam, his expression grave. "The girl, she's Preston Mason's daughter." Sam's brow furrowed. "Should that mean something to me?" "It means," Parker said heavily, "that there is more to Caldwell's pursuit than a runaway bride." He looked back at Ellie. "Your father, did he ever mention Caldwell before the marriage arrangement in any prior dealings?" Ellie shook her head. "No, at least not that I know of. My father kept his gambling affairs private, especially after my mother died." Parker sighed, running a hand through his white hair. "Miss Mason, I believe your father may have taken something from Caldwell. Something far more valuable than money." "What?" Ellie asked, genuinely confused. "We had nothing of value. My father gambled away everything, even our home." "Not everything is material," Parker said cryptically. He turned to Sam. "Remember the church robbery 3 years ago? The strongbox that was taken from my office?" Sam nodded slowly. "I remember. You never told me what was in it." "Records," Parker said. "Testimonies I had collected after the war. Accounts of atrocities committed by certain Confederate units, including Caldwell's." Ellie's blood ran cold. "You think my father stole these records?" "I think," Parker said carefully, "that your father may have discovered something about Caldwell, something that gave him leverage. And I think Caldwell married you not just to settle a debt, but to ensure your father's silence." Sam's eyes narrowed. "And now that she's run Caldwell, fears she knows whatever it was her father knew." "Exactly." Parker looked at Ellie with compassion. "Miss Mason, this is no longer just about a runaway bride. If I'm right, Caldwell will stop at nothing to find you." "But I don't know anything," Ellie protested. "My father never told me about any records or testimonies." Sam and Parker exchanged another look, this one heavy with meaning. "It doesn't matter," Sam said finally. "Caldwell believes you might, and that's enough for him to hunt you down." He moved to the window, scanning the horizon again. "We need to get her somewhere safe." "There is nowhere safe," Parker said quietly. "Not from a man like Caldwell. Not in this territory." Ellie felt the walls closing in around her. She had run from one prison only to find herself trapped in an even more dangerous situation. And now she had drawn these two men into it with her. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice small. Sam turned from the window, his gray eyes meeting hers. There was a steadiness in his gaze that somehow calmed the panic rising within her. "First," he said, "we figure out exactly what your father knew and what Caldwell is afraid of." He picked up the handkerchief again, turning it over in his hands. "This might be more than a keepsake," he said thoughtfully. "Your father mentioned a treasure map. What if he meant it literally?" Ellie took the handkerchief, running her fingers along the edges. There was something there almost imperceptible, a slight bulge in the hem. Using Sam's pocket knife, she carefully separated the stitches, revealing a tightly folded piece of paper hidden within. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. It was a crude map drawn in her father's distinctive handwriting. It showed what appeared to be mine tunnels with an X marked at a specific junction. Below was written a series of numbers, 37 to 1964. "It is a map," she breathed. "To the silver mine, I think. And these numbers, a combination perhaps," Sam suggested, "for a lockbox or safe." Ellie stared at the numbers, a chill running through her as recognition dawned. "No," she said softly, "not a combination. A date, April 19th, 1864. Sam's face paled. The day of the attack. The day Caldwell burned Willow Creek Village. 37 victims. Ellie added, the pieces falling into place. "My God, Sam, I think my father found evidence of what really happened that day. Something that proves Caldwell's guilt." Sam took the map, studying it intently. "This tunnel system matches what I know of the old Hargrove silver mine. It's about 5 miles northeast of here." He looked up, meeting Ellie's gaze. "We need to go there, Bo, now." They worked quickly, gathering supplies they might need: lanterns, rope tools, weapons. As they prepared to leave, Sam paused, his expression troubled. "Ellie," he said quietly, using her familiar name for the first time, "if what we find is what I think it is, it won't just incriminate Caldwell. It could implicate me as well. The officer who ordered the attack that led to the massacre." Ellie looked at him, this man who had taken her in, protected her, taught her to defend herself. This man who carried the weight of the past with every step. "Then we'll face that together," she said simply. "The truth is what matters now, Sam, for both of us." Sam held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded once. "Together, then." They rode out as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, casting long shadows across the desert. The abandoned Hargrove mine was nestled in a rocky outcropping, its entrance partially collapsed but still passable. They approached, cautiously alert for any sign that Caldwell's men might have preceded them. "Looks clear," Sam said after a careful survey. "But stay alert. Caldwell's not a fool. He might have had the same idea we did." They secured the horses in a sheltered spot, then approached the mine entrance. Years of disuse had left it looking forbidding, the darkness beyond the collapsed timbers seeming to swallow the fading daylight. Sam lit a lantern, holding it high as they entered. "Stay close," he warned. "Old mines can be treacherous. Watch for loose rocks, unstable tunnels." The air inside was cool and damp, heavy with the smell of earth and minerals. Their footsteps echoed hollowly as they moved deeper into the mountain, following the main tunnel. Periodically, Sam would consult the map, ensuring they were on the right path. "According to this, we need to take the next tunnel on the left," he said, his voice sounding unnaturally loud in the confined space. "Then it's about 100 yards to the junction marked with the X." They turned as directed, the tunnel narrowing slightly. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness beyond the lantern's glow, a steady plink, plink that marked the passage of time. "Do you think my father found whatever is hidden here?" Ellie asked as they walked. "Possibly," Sam replied. "But if he did, why hide the map instead of the evidence itself? Why not use it against Caldwell directly?" "Maybe he tried," Ellie suggested. "Maybe that's why Caldwell wanted him dead. Why he insisted on marrying me to ensure my father's silence." "And to keep you close under his control," Sam agreed, "in case your father had told you what he found." They reached the junction indicated on the map, a point where 3 tunnels converged. Sam held the lantern higher, examining the area carefully. "The X is marked right here at the junction itself, but I don't see anything obvious." Ellie studied the walls, the floor, the ceiling, looking for any sign of disturbance, any indication something had been hidden. Her eyes caught on a peculiar arrangement of rocks near the base of one wall, too regular to be natural. "There," she said, pointing. "Those rocks were placed deliberately. Sam moved closer, setting the lantern down to examine the formation. You're right. Someone stacked these recently. He began carefully removing the rocks, revealing a small cavity behind them. There's something here. He reached in, withdrawing a metal box about the size of a large book. It was locked, but the key was taped to the bottom, a simple precaution against casual discovery. This has to be it, Ellie said, her heart pounding with anticipation and fear. Whatever my father found, whatever Caldwell is so desperate to recover. Sam handed her the key. You should open it. It's your father's legacy. With trembling fingers, Ellie unlocked the box and lifted the lid. Inside was a leather-bound journal similar to Sam's, but older, more worn, and beneath it a stack of papers, military reports by the look of them, and several folded letters. Sam lifted the journal carefully, opening it to the first page. This belonged to Captain James Hargrove, Caldwell's partner, he said, reading the inscription. Dated 1864 to 1865. Hargrove was with Caldwell in Tennessee, Ellie asked. It appears so, Sam confirmed, flipping through the pages. He was Caldwell's second-in-command in the 5th Tennessee Cavalry. He paused, his expression darkening as he read. Ellie, this is it. Hargrove documented everything, the attack on their camp, Caldwell's retaliation against Willow Creek. But there's more. What do you mean, Orpheum? Sam looked up, his face grim. According to this, the village massacre wasn't a heat-of-the-moment retaliation. It was planned. Caldwell had been looking for an excuse to attack Willow Creek for months. The villagers were suspected of helping Union sympathizers, providing food and medical care. Ellie felt sick. He used your attack as justification for something he already intended to do. Yes, Sam turned another page. And there's worse. The attack itself, Hargrove describes it in detail. They surrounded the village before dawn, set fire to the buildings, then shot anyone who tried to escape the flames. His voice caught. Men, women, children. It didn't matter to Caldwell. Anyone who ran was cut down. Ellie took the journal from Sam's hands, needing to see for herself. The handwriting was cramped but legible. The descriptions clinical, yet somehow more horrifying for their detachment. April 19th, 1864. Executed Caldwell's orders at Willow Creek Settlement. Surrounded at 0400 hours. Fired buildings at Caldwell's signal. Primary objective, elimination of Union sympathizers, accomplished. Secondary casualties, higher than anticipated. Final count, 37 dead. No survivors as per Caldwell's directive. C took particular interest in ensuring complete destruction. Disturbing to witness even in wartime context. Beginning to question C's stability and judgment. Ellie looked up at Sam, horror washing through her. No survivors as per Caldwell's directive, she quoted. He wanted them all dead. It wasn't just retaliation, it was extermination. And Hargrove documented it all, Sam said, examining the other papers from the box. Military reports that were never filed, letters from Hargrove to his superiors expressing concern about Caldwell's actions, even a list of the victims with their ages. He looked up, his expression haunted. The youngest was 4 years old, Ellie. The weight of it settled on them both, the magnitude of what they had discovered, the evil it represented. This wasn't just evidence of war crimes. It was proof of a calculated massacre, of a man's descent into monstrosity. This is what my father found, Ellie said softly. This is why Caldwell killed him. Why he wanted to control me. Yes, Sam agreed. With this evidence, Caldwell could be tried for war crimes even after all these years. His wealth, his position, his freedom, all of it would be forfeit. And my father tried to use it to force Caldwell to leave us alone. Ellie continued, the pieces falling into place. But instead of giving in, Caldwell killed him and took me as insurance. Sam nodded grimly. Your father probably hid this before confronting Caldwell, keeping the map as leverage. But he underestimated how far Caldwell would go to protect himself. Ellie closed the journal, her decision made. We need to take this to the authorities, to a federal marshal, someone beyond Caldwell's influence. The nearest federal marshal is in Tucson, 2 days' ride from here, Sam said, and Caldwell expects us in town tomorrow at noon. Then we leave tonight, Ellie insisted, under cover of darkness. We can be halfway to Tucson before Caldwell realizes we're gone. Sam studied her face in the lantern light, seeing the determination there. It won't be easy, he warned. Caldwell will come after us with everything he has, and he'll make good on his threats to Parker and the others. Then we send Parker a warning, Ellie countered. Tell him to get to safety to spread the word about Caldwell's intentions. But we can't give in now, Sam. Not with this evidence in our hands. For a long moment, Sam was silent, weighing their options. Then he nodded once decision made. We'll go to Tucson, but first we need to ensure copies of these documents are made hidden in multiple locations. Insurance in case we don't make it. We'll make it, Ellie said with a confidence she didn't entirely feel. We have to. They carefully repacked the box, securing it in Sam's saddlebag before making their way out of the mine. The sun had set while they were inside the desert, now bathed in the silvery glow of a rising moon. The night was clear and still, the stars spread like diamonds across the velvet sky. As they mounted their horses, Ellie looked back at the mine entrance, the unlikely resting place of a terrible truth hidden for more than a decade. Her father had found it, had died for it. Now it fell to her to ensure his death wasn't in vain. Ready? Sam asked, bringing his gelding alongside Willow. Ellie nodded, feeling a strange calm settle over her. For the first time since fleeing Caldwell's ranch, she wasn't just running away from something. She was moving towards something, toward justice, toward truth, toward the possibility of a future free from fear. Ready, she confirmed. Together they rode into the desert night, the evidence of Victor Caldwell's crimes secure between them. Behind them lay the past, a tangle of pain, loss, and betrayal. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and the faint but growing possibility of redemption for both of them. But as they crested a ridge overlooking the valley below, Ellie's heart sank. In the distance, moving fast and purposeful across the desert floor, was a group of riders, too many to be Parker or friendly visitors, and they were heading directly toward Sam's homestead. Caldwell's men, Sam confirmed following her gaze. He must have had us followed to the mine, or he was always planning to move against us tonight, deadline or no deadline. What do we do? Ellie asked, fear tightening her throat. Sam's expression was grim, but resolved. We can't outrun them to Tucson, not with that head start, and we can't return to the homestead. He thought for a moment. There's another option. It's risky, but it might be our only chance. I'm listening. Parker's church, Sam said. It's closer than Tucson, and it has the telegraph office next door. We could send word to the federal marshal, ask him to come to us, rather than trying to reach him. Ellie considered this. But Caldwell threatened Parker, threatened the church itself. Wouldn't that be the first place he'd look for us? Yes, Sam acknowledged, but it's also the one place he might hesitate to attack openly. Even Caldwell has to maintain some pretense of civility, of respecting the law and the church. If we can get there before him, establish ourselves with witnesses present, it could work, Ellie agreed. And if not, at least we go down fighting for something that matters. Sam nodded, a grim smile touching his lips. For something that matters, he echoed. Let's ride. They altered their course, heading southeast toward the small town where Parker's church stood. The night wrapped around them like a cloak, only sounds the steady rhythm of hoofbeats and their own breathing. Above the stars watched impassibly eternal witnesses to the human drama unfolding beneath them. As they rode, Ellie thought of all that had happened since that desperate night she had fled across the desert. The stranger who had opened his door to her, the bond that had formed between them, the secrets they had uncovered together. Whatever happened now, she knew she was no longer alone in her fight, and that knowledge gave her strength for the trials that surely lay ahead. They rode through the night, pushing their horses as hard as they dared. The evidence of Caldwell's crimes was secured in Sam's saddlebag, a weight far heavier than its physical presence suggested. Every shadow seemed to conceal enemies. Every distant sound caused them to tense in anticipation of pursuit. The moon sailed high overhead, casting the desert in silver light. It would have been beautiful under different circumstances, the stark landscape transformed into something otherworldly, ancient. But beauty was a luxury they couldn't afford to contemplate now. Survival consumed their attention. How much farther? Ellie asked as they paused briefly to rest the horses. Her body ached from hours in the saddle, and Willow was showing signs of fatigue, her breathing labored. Another hour, maybe less, Sam replied, scanning the horizon behind them. No sign of pursuit yet, but that didn't mean they weren't being followed. The church is on the north edge of town. If we approach from the east, we might avoid being seen. Ellie nodded, taking a sip from her canteen before offering water to Willow. The mare drank gratefully, nudging Ellie's hand when she was finished. You've done well with her, Sam observed. She trusts you. She's a good horse, Ellie replied, stroking Willow's neck. Like her owner, she gives more than she takes. Sam's eyes met hers briefly, something unspoken passing between them. Then he looked away, adjusting his saddle. We should keep moving. Dawn's not far off and will be more visible in daylight. They mounted again, continuing their journey at a slightly slower pace to preserve the horses' strength. The terrain gradually changed as they approached the town of Redemption, an irony of a name that wasn't lost on either of them. Scrub brush gave way to scattered cottonwoods, evidence of the small river that had made settlement possible in this harsh landscape. As the first hint of dawn lightened the eastern sky, the silhouette of the church steeple became visible against the stars. A simple wooden structure, Parker's church wasn't grand by Eastern standards, but in this territory it represented civilization, community, and the possibility of justice. They approached cautiously, circling to the eastern side as planned. The church stood silent and dark, the small house beside it, Parker's residence, equally still. No lights, no movement. Not necessarily concerning at this hour, but it put Sam on alert. Something's not right, he murmured as they dismounted behind the church, tethering their horses to a hitching post near the back door. Parker's an early riser. There should be a lamp lit by now. Ellie felt a chill that had nothing to do with the pre-dawn air. Could Caldwell have reached him already? Possible, Sam acknowledged grimly. Stay close and keep your revolver ready. They approached the back door of the church, moving silently across the hard-packed earth. Sam tried the handle unlocked, which was normal for a church in these parts. The door swung open with a slight creak, revealing the darkened interior. Parker, Sam called softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Joseph, are you here? No response. They moved further inside, Sam leading the way with his pistol drawn. The church was a single-room pews arranged in rows facing a simple altar. A door to the left led to a small vestry where Parker kept his clerical items and church records. It was from this room that they heard a faint groan. Sam motioned for Ellie to stay back as he approached the vestry door. He pushed it open slowly, revealing a scene that made Ellie's blood run cold. Despite Sam's protective gesture, she moved forward to see. Reverend Parker lay on the floor, his white hair stained with blood from a wound to his temple. He was conscious, but barely, his breathing shallow and labored. Joseph. Sam holstered his weapon and knelt beside the older man, gently assessing his injuries. What happened? Who did this to you? Parker's eyes flickered open, focusing with difficulty on Sam's face. Caldwell's men. He managed, his voice weak. Looking for you. For the girl. Wouldn't tell them where you might go. Anger flashed across Sam's features, quickly controlled as he turned his attention to Parker's wound. Head wounds bleed more than they should, he told Ellie, who had moved to Parker's other side. It looks worse than it is. Hand me that cloth on the desk. Ellie did as instructed, watching as Sam cleaned the wound with practiced movements. Will he be all right? She asked. With rest and care, yes, Sam replied. But we need to get him somewhere safer than this. Caldwell's men might return. No time, Parker interrupted, gripping Sam's arm with surprising strength. Caldwell knows you found something. He's gathering men. By noon, he'll have enough to burn this town to the ground if necessary. How does he know we found something? Ellie asked, the sick feeling growing in her stomach. Followed you, Parker gasped. To the mine, watched from distance. Didn't want to risk confronting you there. Too isolated. No witnesses. Sam's expression darkened. He's forcing a public confrontation. Here where he has influence, where he can control the narrative. Yes, Parker confirmed, but also where others can see, where truth might be heard. Sam helped Parker to a sitting position, propping him against the wall. You should have told him what he wanted to know, Joseph. It wasn't worth this. A ghost of a smile touched Parker's bloodied lips. Some things are worth any price, Samuel. You taught me that. Ellie looked between the two men, sensing a deeper history than she'd been aware of. What do we do now? She asked. If Caldwell is gathering men, we can't stay here. No, Sam agreed. But we can't run either. Not anymore. He turned to Parker. The telegraph office, is William still operating it? Parker nodded weakly. Opens at dawn. Good man, trustworthy. Then that's our first stop, Sam decided. We send telegrams to the federal marshal in Tucson, to the territorial governor, to anyone who might listen. Create a record of what we found before Caldwell can silence us. And then, Ellie pressed. Sam's eyes met hers, steady and resolved. And then we face Caldwell one last time. The gravity of those words settled over them. One last time. Either they would end Caldwell's reign of terror today, or he would end them. There would be no middle ground, no compromise, no tomorrow for at least one side of this conflict. "I'll help you move Reverend Parker to his bed," Ellie said, accepting the inevitability of what lay ahead. "Then we'll go to the telegraph office." Together, they managed to get Parker to his small bedroom in the house attached to the church. Sam bandaged his head properly, and Ellie brought water and what little food they could find in the kitchen. "Rest now," Sam told the older man. "We'll handle things from here." Parker gripped Sam's hand. "Be careful, Samuel. Caldwell is desperate. A desperate man is capable of anything." "I know," Sam replied grimly, "but so am I." As they prepared to leave, Parker called to Ellie. "Miss Mason? Eleanor, your father. He was trying to protect you, in his own way. Remember that." Tears welled in Ellie's eyes at the mention of her father. "I will," she promised. "Thank you, Reverend." Outside, dawn was breaking fully now. Golden light spilled across the desert and into the small town. A few early risers were visible on the main street, shopkeepers, opening their establishments, a blacksmith already at work at his forge. Normal life continuing, unaware of the storm gathering on the horizon. The telegraph office was a small building near the center of town, its windows already lit. Sam and Ellie approached cautiously, alert for any sign of Caldwell's men. But the streets remained peaceful for now. The operator, Williams, looked up in surprise as they entered. A thin man with spectacles and a perpetual ink stain on his right hand, he recognized Sam immediately. "Major Holloway," he greeted him. "Early for you to be in town, isn't it?" "Urgent business, William," Sam replied. "I need to send several telegrams immediately. Official business, highest priority." Something in Sam's tone must have conveyed the seriousness of the situation, for Williams asked no further questions. He simply nodded and prepared his equipment. "Where to first?" "Federal Marshal's Office, Tucson," Sam dictated. "Attention Marshal James Davidson. Evidence of war crimes committed by Victor Caldwell. Former Confederate captain discovered. Documentation of Willow Creek Massacre, 1864. 37 civilians executed on Caldwell's orders. Request immediate assistance in redemption. Witnesses at risk. Signed Major Samuel Holloway, U.S. Army, retired." Williams's eyes widened as he transmitted the message, but he made no comment. "Now to the territorial governor," Sam continued. "Same message, but add Caldwell threatening violence against town of Redemption. Civilian casualties likely without intervention." They sent 3 more telegrams to the commander of the nearest army post, to a journalist Sam knew in Santa Fe, who had written exposés on corruption in the territories, and finally to a former comrade of Sam's, who now served as a judge in Denver. "That should create enough official awareness to make Caldwell think twice," Sam said as Williams sent the final message, "and ensure that if anything happens to us, the truth doesn't die with us." "Responses may take hours," Williams warned, assuming the lines stay up. He glanced nervously out the window. "Word is that Caldwell's in a dangerous mood. His men were asking all over town yesterday about you, Major." "I know," Sam replied grimly. "Keep your head down today, Williams. And if any responses come through, take them directly to Reverend Parker at the church. He's been injured, but is safe for now." Williams nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation without needing details. "God be with you, Major, and you, ma'am," he added, tipping his head to Ellie. Outside, the town was coming fully to life now. More people moving about the streets. Some nodded to Sam in greeting. Others simply stared, curious about the woman at his side. Ellie felt exposed, vulnerable under their gazes. How many of these townspeople owed allegiance to Caldwell, whether through fear or financial dependence? How many would stand aside if violence erupted? "What now?" she asked quietly as they walked back toward the church. "Now we secure the evidence," Sam replied. "Make copies of the most damning documents, hide them in different locations. Then we prepare for Caldwell's arrival." "You really think he'll come himself?" "Not just send his men," Sam's expression was grim but certain. "Oh, he'll come. This is personal for him now. Not just about silencing us, but about finishing what began in Tennessee. He won't delegate that satisfaction to anyone else." They returned to the church, checking on Parker, who was sleeping fitfully, the bandage on his head already showing spots of fresh blood. Sam changed it carefully, trying not to wake the older man. "He needs a doctor," Ellie observed worriedly. "The town doctor is Caldwell's cousin by marriage," Sam replied. "We can't risk it. Parker's tough, tougher than he looks. He'll pull through." They set to work copying the most incriminating pages from Hargrove's journal, as well as the military reports that had never been filed. Sam's handwriting was neat and precise, documenting the horrors of Willow Creek with the same detachment that Hargrove had employed. But Ellie could see the tension in his jaw, the tightness around his eyes as he wrote. "This brings it all back, doesn't it?" she asked softly. "The war, the aftermath." Sam paused, staring at the page before him. "Yes," he admitted, "but it's not just the memories that are difficult. It's knowing that if I had made different decisions, acted on different intelligence, none of this might have happened. Those villagers might still be alive. Your father might still be alive. You might never have been forced into marriage with that monster." "You can't know that," Ellie countered. "The war created thousands of Caldwell's men who used conflict as an excuse for cruelty, who brought their violence home when the fighting ended. If it hadn't been Willow Creek, it might have been somewhere else. Someone else." Sam looked up, studying her face. "When did you get so wise?" he asked, a hint of admiration in his voice. "I've had a good teacher these past weeks," Ellie replied. "A man who showed me that our past shapes us but doesn't have to define us. That redemption is possible even after the worst mistakes." Something shifted in Sam's eyes, a softening, a vulnerability he rarely allowed himself to show. For a moment it seemed he might say more, but then the moment passed and he returned to his copying work. "We should finish this," he said. "Time's running short." They worked in silence after that, each lost in their own thoughts. When the copies were complete, Sam divided them into several packets, hiding them in different locations throughout the church, beneath a loose floorboard, near the altar, inside a hollow space in one of the pews behind a brick in the vestry wall that Parker had shown him years ago. "Insurance," he explained as he concealed the last packet, "in case things go badly today." Ellie watched him, noting the methodical way he approached even this grim task. Sam Holloway was a man who had lived with death as a constant companion, who had learned to prepare for the worst, while still fighting for better. "You don't expect to survive this, do you?" she asked bluntly. Sam straightened, meeting her gaze directly. "I expect to do whatever is necessary to ensure Caldwell faces justice," he replied evenly. "If that means my survival, good. If not," he shrugged. "I've been living on borrowed time since Tennessee anyway." "That's not true," Ellie protested. "Your life has value, Sam. What happened in the past, all of it, doesn't diminish that." Sam's expression softened slightly. "Maybe you're right, but some debts can only be paid one way, Ellie, and I've carried mine long enough." Before she could argue further, a commotion outside drew their attention, raised voices, the sound of multiple horses arriving. Sam moved to the window, peering cautiously through the curtain. "Caldwell," he confirmed grimly, "with at least 15 men. They're gathering in front of the church." Ellie joined him at the window. Sure enough, Victor Caldwell sat astride his black stallion in the center of the churchyard, surrounded by armed men. He was dressed formally, as if for a social occasion, rather than a confrontation. Black suit, crisp white shirt, silver bolo tie. The scar on his face stood out starkly against his tan skin, a physical manifestation of the darkness within. "Major Holloway," Caldwell's voice carried clearly pitched to be heard inside the church. "I know you're in there with my wife. I've come to reclaim what's mine as promised. Send her out along with the documents, and this can end peacefully." Sam turned to Ellie, his expression grave. "Stay here," he instructed. "If things go badly, take the original evidence and run. There's a back way out of the vestry that leads to the cemetery. From there you can reach the horses." "I'm not leaving you to face him alone," Ellie insisted. "This isn't a debate," Sam replied firmly. "Someone has to survive to ensure the truth comes out." "That someone is you, Ellie. Promise me." The echo of his words from days earlier wasn't lost on her. Once again, Sam was placing her safety, her survival above his own. But this time the stakes were even higher. "I promise," she said finally, "but only if there is truly no other option." Sam nodded, accepting her condition. Then he checked his revolver one last time before moving to the church door. Taking a deep breath, he opened it and stepped onto the porch facing Caldwell and his men with apparent calm. "This is a house of God, Caldwell," he called. "I'd thank you to show some respect." Caldwell's lips curled in a cold smile. "Respect is earned, Major, much like a wife's obedience. I've come for both Eleanor and what she stole from me." "She stole nothing," Sam replied evenly, "and she's not your wife in any true sense of the word. A marriage forced under duress, consummated through violence, no court would uphold it. Perhaps not in the North, Caldwell conceded. But we're not in the North, are we? Out here possession is 9/10 of the law, and Eleanor is mine by right of contract with her father. Her father is dead, Sam pointed out. By your hand, if I'm not mistaken. A murmur ran through the gathering crowd of townspeople who had assembled at a safe distance to watch the confrontation. Caldwell's eyes narrowed dangerously. Careful, Major. Slander is a serious charge. Not slander if it's true, Sam countered. Wished as it's true that you ordered the massacre of 37 civilians at Willow Creek in 1864. Women and children, Caldwell, burned alive or shot as they fled the flames. Another louder murmur from the crowd. Caldwell's face darkened with anger. That's enough, he snapped. You've said your piece. Now send out the girl and the documents, or we'll take them by force. From her position just inside the doorway, Ellie could see the tension in Sam's shoulders, the careful way he maintained enough distance from Caldwell's men to have reaction time if needed. He was outnumbered, outgunned, yet he stood his ground with a dignity that made her heart ache. The documents have already been copied, Sam informed Caldwell. Telegrams sent to the federal marshal, the territorial governor of the army. They know what you did, Caldwell. They're coming. It's over. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Caldwell's face. He glanced at the telegraph office visible down the street, then back at Sam. You're bluffing, he decided. There hasn't been time. We rode through the night, Sam replied simply. Arrived at dawn. The telegrams went out an hour ago. Even if you kill us both now, the truth is already spreading. Like fire, he added pointedly, consuming everything in its path. The reference to fire to Willow Creek to the method of Caldwell's greatest crime was deliberate and effective. Caldwell's face contorted with rage, his control slipping. Enough, he shouted. I didn't come to bandy words with a failed officer who couldn't even save his own family from a fire he caused. He turned to his men. Bring them both out, Jean. Several men dismounted, moving toward the church with guns drawn. Sam's hand moved to his holster, but he didn't draw yet. Last chance, Caldwell, he warned. Ride away now. Face the justice that's coming with some dignity. Justice, Caldwell laughed bitterly. There is no justice in this world, Major. Only power. And I still have more of that than you. As his men reached the church steps, Ellie made her decision. She wouldn't hide while Sam faced this alone. Opening the door wider, she stepped out to stand beside him, her own revolver held steady in her hand. That's where you're wrong, she said clearly. True power isn't in how many guns you command or how much fear you inspire. It's in the truth. And the truth about you, Victor Caldwell, is that you're a coward who burns women and children alive to feel strong. Caldwell's eyes widened at the sight of her, then narrowed dangerously. So the little bird has found her voice, he said softly. And quite a sharp one at that. I'll enjoy teaching you proper respect once we're home. I'm not going anywhere with you, Ellie replied, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her stomach. And neither are these. She held up Hargrove's journal with her free hand. Your former partner was quite thorough in documenting your crimes, Victor. He must have suspected that one day he might need protection from you. Hargrove was a weak fool, Caldwell spat, too squeamish for necessary actions. Necessary, Sam interjected. Was it necessary to order your men to shoot children as they fled burning homes? Was it necessary to ensure there were no survivors to testify against you? Caldwell's control snapped. Yes, he shouted, his face contorted with rage. Yes, it was necessary. Those people were helping the enemy. Your men, Holloway, they deserved what they got. Every last one of them. A shocked silence fell over the churchyard. Caldwell seemed to realize too late what he had admitted, and in front of dozens of witnesses. His face paled slightly, then hardened into a mask of cold determination. Take them, he ordered his men. Kill the major if he resists. Bring the girl to me unharmed. What happened next unfolded with the terrible clarity of violence long anticipated. The first of Caldwell's men reached the porch, lunging for Ellie. Sam moved with the speed and precision of a trained soldier, his revolver clearing its holster in one smooth motion. The shot echoed across the churchyard, and the man fell backward, clutching his shoulder. Then chaos erupted. Gunfire exploded from multiple directions as Caldwell's men opened fire. Sam pushed Ellie behind him, returning fire with methodical precision. Two more of Caldwell's men fell before a bullet struck Sam in the side, staggering him. Sam, Ellie cried, supporting him as he stumbled. Inside, he gasped. Go back inside. They retreated into the church, bullets splintering the doorframe around them. Sam positioned himself at a window, continuing to fire despite the blood staining his shirt. Ellie took up position at another window, her heart pounding, but her hands steady as she aimed and fired at the men attempting to approach the church. We need to hold them off, Sam said through gritted teeth. The longer this goes on, the more witnesses, the more chance of help arriving. Outside, Caldwell was shouting orders, reorganizing his men for a more coordinated assault. Townspeople were scattering, some running for safety, others braver or more foolhardy, staying to watch from whatever cover they could find. You're hit, Ellie said, glancing at Sam's wound. Let me help you. No time, he replied. Save your ammunition. Make every shot count. The firefight continued, minutes stretching into what felt like hours. Sam's breathing grew more labored, his movements slower as blood loss took its toll. But he never stopped, never yielded his position. Ellie fought alongside him, her initial terror giving way to a cold, focused determination. She would not let Caldwell win. Not after everything they had discovered, everything they had endured. A lull in the shooting allowed Ellie to risk a glance outside. Several of Caldwell's men were down, either dead or wounded. Others had taken cover behind horses, wagons, whatever was available. Caldwell himself had dismounted, taking shelter behind a water trough. They're regrouping, she reported to Sam. At least 5 men down, maybe more. Sam nodded, pressing a hand to his bleeding side. They'll try to circle around. Come in through the back. We need to. He was interrupted by a thunderous crashing sound as the back door of the church splintered inward. 3 of Caldwell's men burst through, guns raised. Down, Sam shouted, pushing Ellie to the floor as bullets tore through the air above them. They scrambled for cover behind the solid oak pews, returning fire as best they could. One of the attackers fell, but the other 2 kept advancing, joined now by more men entering through the shattered door. The vestry, Sam gasped, his face pale with blood loss. Go, Ellie. Now. Not without you, she insisted, firing again to keep their attackers at bay. I'll cover you, Sam promised, but you need to go. Get the evidence out. Remember your promise. Ellie wanted to argue, to refuse, but the look in Sam's eyes determined that accepting almost peaceful stopped her. This was his choice, his way of finding the redemption he had sought for so long. I'll make sure they pay, she whispered. All of them. Sam nodded once, then turned to face their attackers. On 3, he said. 1, 2, 3. He rose from cover, firing rapidly to draw attention, while Ellie darted toward the vestry door. Bullets splintered the wood around her, but none found their mark. She reached the door, throwing herself through it as Sam continued to provide covering fire. The vestry was small, containing only a desk, a cabinet for clerical robes, and a narrow door that led to the cemetery behind the church. Ellie moved quickly, securing Hargrove's journal and the other original documents in a satchel she found hanging on the wall. As she prepared to leave, a faint sound caught her attention, movement from the adjoining room where they had left Parker resting. Cautiously, she opened the connecting door. Parker was awake, sitting up in bed with a shotgun across his lap. Miss Mason, he greeted her, his voice weak but determined. I heard the shooting. Caldwell's men are attacking the church, Ellie explained quickly. Sam is holding them off, but he's wounded. I need to get the evidence out. Parker nodded, understanding immediately. Take the cemetery path, he instructed. Follow it west to the river, then north. There's a small cabin there used by trappers. You'll be safe until help arrives. And what about you? Ellie asked, concerned by the pallor of the older man's face. I'll help Sam, Parker replied, attempting to rise despite his obvious weakness. This is my church. I won't abandon it or him. Ellie hesitated, torn between her promise to Sam and her reluctance to leave both men to face Caldwell alone. But the sound of gunfire intensifying in the main church decided her. The evidence was too important to risk. Be careful, she urged Parker. Both of you. Parker managed a weak smile. Go with God, child. And remember, even in the darkest night, dawn will come. Ellie nodded, blinking back tears as she turned toward the back door. She paused with her hand on the latch, listening to the battle raging in the church. Sam's distinctive revolver still firing, meaning he was still alive, still fighting. It gave her the strength to pull open the door and step into the morning sunlight. The cemetery stretched before her, a peaceful contrast to the violence she had just left. Rows of simple wooden crosses marked the final resting places of redemption's citizens. Ellie moved quickly between them, heading for the west gate that would lead to the river. She had almost reached it when a voice froze her in her tracks. Going somewhere, Eleanor. Victor Caldwell stood between her and the gate, his revolver aimed directly at her heart. His formerly immaculate suit was dusty now, his face streaked with sweat and grime, but his eyes were clear and cold, filled with a hatred that stole Ellie's breath. How, she began. Did I know you'd try to escape this way? Caldwell finished for her. Simple. It's what I would do. Send my men through the front while I circle around to cut off retreat. He smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. Your Major Holloway isn't the only one who understands tactics. Ellie's mind raced, calculating options, possibilities. Her own revolver was in her hand, but Caldwell already had her covered. If she tried to raise it, he would fire first. It's over, Victor, she said, playing for time. Even if you kill me, the evidence is already out there. Sam sent telegrams to the federal marshal, to the governor. They know what you did. Perhaps, Caldwell allowed, but telegrams can be intercepted. Marshals can be delayed or misdirected. And witnesses. He gestured toward the church where gunfire still echoed. Witnesses can die in unfortunate accidents. You can't kill an entire town, Ellie pointed out. I don't need to, Caldwell replied. Just the troublemakers. The rest will fall in line as they always have. He extended his free hand. Now give me the satchel, Eleanor. Slowly. Ellie made no move to comply. And then what? You kill me anyway. Not necessarily, Caldwell said, his tone almost reasonable. You're still my wife, after all. If you cooperate now, demonstrate proper obedience, perhaps we can begin again on better terms. The very suggestion made bile rise in Ellie's throat. I would rather die, she stated flatly. Caldwell's expression hardened. That can be arranged. But first the satchel. I won't ask again. Ellie knew she had seconds to decide to act. Caldwell would kill her regardless. His offer of mercy was as empty as his soul, but if she could distract him, create an opening. Fine, she said, feigning resignation. You win, Victor. Just don't hurt anyone else. She slowly lowered her revolver, letting it dangle from her finger by the trigger guard. Caldwell's smile widened, satisfaction and triumph clear in his expression. A wise decision, my dear. Perhaps there's hope for you yet. As he stepped forward to take the satchel, Ellie made her move. She dropped her revolver, but as Caldwell's eyes instinctively followed its fall, she flung the heavy satchel directly at his face with all her strength. Caldwell staggered backward, momentarily blinded and disoriented. Ellie dove for her fallen weapon, rolling to the side as Caldwell fired blindly in her direction. The bullet kicked up dirt inches from her head. She came up in a shooting stance just as Sam had taught her. No hesitation, no uncertainty. When the moment comes, and it will come, hesitation will get you killed. Ellie fired twice in rapid succession. The first shot went wide, but the second found its mark. Caldwell jerked backward, his expression more surprised than pained, as a crimson stain blossomed on his chest. For a moment they stared at each other across the cemetery, the monster who had terrorized so many, and the woman who had finally stopped him. Then Caldwell's legs gave way, and he collapsed heavily onto the ground, his revolver falling from suddenly nerveless fingers. Ellie approached cautiously, her weapon still trained on him. Caldwell was still alive, but barely blood bubbling at his lips with each labored breath. His eyes, when they focused on her, held no fear, only a cold fury and something like disbelief. A woman, he managed, the words wet with blood. Killed by a woman. Not just any woman, Ellie replied steadily. A woman who refused to be a victim anymore, who chose to fight back. She knelt beside him, just out of reach. And I'm not the only one, Victor. There will be others. Women who refuse to be owned, to be silenced. Your kind of man is becoming obsolete. Rage flickered in Caldwell's fading eyes. He tried to speak again, but only blood emerged. His hand twitched toward his fallen revolver, a final futile attempt to assert his will. Then his eyes fixed on something beyond Ellie, something only he could see, and the last breath rattled from his lungs. Victor Caldwell, former Confederate captain, architect of the Willow Creek Massacre, was dead. Ellie remained kneeling beside him for a long moment, waiting for some profound emotion to emerge. Triumph, perhaps, or relief. But all she felt was a quiet certainty that justice long delayed had finally been served. The sound of gunfire from the church had ceased. Whether that signaled victory or defeat for Sam and Parker, she didn't know. But her duty now was clear, secure, the evidence ensure the truth was known. She retrieved the satchel, checking that the documents inside were undamaged, then started toward the gate once more. She would follow Parker's instructions, reach the trapper's cabin, and wait for help to arrive. But she had taken only a few steps when a voice called her name. Ellie! She turned, her heart leaping at the sound. Sam Holloway stood at the entrance to the cemetery, leaning heavily on Parker. Both men were bloodied but alive, their expressions changing from concern to relief when they saw her, standing unharmed. Sam, she breathed, running to him. You're alive, both of you. Barely, Sam admitted with a grimace of pain, but Caldwell's men retreated when they heard the shots from out here. What happened? Ellie glanced back at the still form lying in the dust. Caldwell, she said simply. He was waiting for me, tried to take the evidence. Sam's eyes widened slightly, then filled with understanding and something like pride. You did what you had to do, he said quietly. Yes, Ellie agreed. I did. Parker, weak but alert, surveyed the cemetery with a mixture of sorrow and resignation. So much death, he murmured, even in hallowed ground. But an end to it now, Sam pointed out. Caldwell can't hurt anyone else. Ellie noticed for the first time how badly Sam was wounded. His shirt was soaked with blood, his face alarmingly pale. He swayed slightly, even with Parker's support. You need a doctor, she said urgently. Town doctor won't help, Sam reminded her, his voice growing weaker. Not with this many of Caldwell's men still around. Then we'll get you to the trapper's cabin, Ellie decided. I can tend your wounds there until help arrives. Parker nodded agreement. The telegrams will bring assistance eventually, but we need to move quickly. Some of Caldwell's men may return when they realize he's missing. Together, they made their way out of the cemetery, Ellie supporting Sam, while Parker, still unsteady himself, carried the precious satchel of evidence. They avoided the main streets, taking a circuitous route toward the river that flowed along the western edge of town. The trapper's cabin, Parker had mentioned, was small, but solidly built, nestled among cottonwoods that provided shade and concealment. Inside was sparse but sufficient, a bed, a table, basic cooking implements, and most importantly, a well-stocked medical kit. Ellie helped Sam into the bed, then set to work cleaning and bandaging his wound. The bullet had passed through his side, missing vital organs, but causing significant blood loss. With careful treatment, he would recover, but it would take time and rest. You should have run when I told you to, Sam chided weakly as she worked. That was the plan. Plans change, Ellie replied, focusing on her task, and I don't abandon the people I care about. Sam's eyes glazed with pain, though they were searched her face. You care about a broken-down old soldier. I care about a good man who taught me to stand and fight rather than run and hide, Ellie corrected him. A man who risks himself for others without hesitation. A man who deserves a second chance at life, at happiness. Sam was silent for a long moment, absorbing her words. And you, he finally asked, what will you do now after all this is over? Ellie paused in her ministrations, considering the question. It was the first time she had thought beyond survival, beyond the immediate danger that had consumed their attention for so long. I don't know, she admitted. My father is gone. I have no home to return to. She met Sam's gaze directly. But I think I might stay here. This land, harsh as it is, has shown me my own strength. I'd like to build something here. Something good. A ghost of a smile touched Sam's lips. It's good land for building, he agreed, for starting over. Parker, who had been keeping watch at the window, turned to them. The town seems quiet now, he reported. Caldwell's men have either fled or gone to ground, but they'll regroup eventually, especially when they find his body. Do they have a leader, Ellie asked? Someone who would take over now that Caldwell is gone? His foreman Matthews, perhaps, Sam suggested. But without Caldwell's money and influence behind him, he won't command the same loyalty. The coalition will fracture. Good, Ellie said firmly. Let them scatter like the cockroaches they are. The day wore on, tension gradually easing as no pursuit materialized. Parker tended a small fire, heating water for coffee and the simple stew he prepared from supplies in the cabin. Sam drifted in and out of consciousness, his body fighting to heal from the trauma it had endured. As evening approached, Parker made a decision. I should return to the church, he said. Check for telegraph responses, ensure the evidence copies are still secure. and the townspeople will need reassurance guidance in the aftermath of today's violence. Is it safe? Ellie asked, concerned. Safer than it was, Parker replied, and a shepherd doesn't abandon his flock in times of trouble. He smiled slightly. Even a wounded shepherd. After Parker had gone, promising to return by morning, Ellie sat beside Sam's bed, watching the rise and fall of his chest as he slept. His face in repose looked younger, the lines of worry and guilt temporarily smoothed away. She found herself wondering what he had been like before the war, before the tragedies that had shaped him into the man she knew. Outside, the sun began to set, painting the desert in familiar hues of gold and crimson. Ellie moved to the window, watching as shadows lengthened across the landscape. Despite everything, the violence, the loss, the uncertainty that still lay ahead, she felt a strange peace settling over her. For the first time in years, perhaps in her entire life, she was free. Free from her father's gambling debts, free from Caldwell's brutal ownership, free to choose her own path. And that freedom had been bought at a terrible price. A sound from the bed drew her attention. Sam was awake, watching her with clear, lucid eyes. "How long was I asleep?" he asked, his voice stronger than before. "Most of the day," Ellie replied, returning to his side. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been shot," Sam answered dryly. "But I'll live, thanks to you." Ellie shook her head. "You're the one who taught me everything I needed to survive this, to fight back." "You always had the strength," Sam countered. "All I did was show you how to use it." They fell into a comfortable silence, the kind that only develops between people who have faced death together and emerged changed but alive. "Ellie," Sam said finally, "when this is all over, when the marshals have come, when the evidence is secure, I want you to know that you're welcome to stay at my homestead. I mean, if you want to." The offer hung in the air between them, weighted with unspoken possibilities. Ellie considered it, carefully aware of all it might entail. A life in the desert, harsh but free. A partnership with this complex, honorable man who had already given her so much. "I'd like that," she said simply. "Very much." Sam's eyes, when they met hers, held a warmth she had glimpsed only rarely before. "Good," he replied. "That's good." Another silence more charged than the last. There was more to say, Ellie knew, more to explore between them, but there would be time for that later. For now, it was enough to know that they had both chosen the same path forward. The sound of approaching horses broke the moment. Ellie moved quickly to the window, hand going to her revolver. "Federal marshals," she reported with relief, recognizing the distinctive badges even in the fading light. "At least 6 of them, and Parker is with them." Sam attempted to sit up, wincing with the effort. "Help me up," he requested. "I should greet them properly." "You should rest," Ellie countered, but she helped him into a sitting position, nonetheless arranging pillows to support his back. Minutes later, the cabin door opened to admit Parker and a tall, weathered man wearing a marshal's badge. Behind them, more marshals secured the perimeter, professional and efficient. "Major Holloway," the lead marshal greeted Sam. "Marshal James Davidson. Your telegrams caused quite a stir in Tucson. We rode out immediately." "Appreciate the prompt response, Marshal," Sam replied. "As you can see, the situation was rather urgent." Davidson nodded, his sharp eyes taking in Sam's bandaged torso and the evidence satchel Parker placed on the table. "Reverend Parker has given me a preliminary briefing. Quite a story. And now you tell me the man at the center of it, this Victor Caldwell, is dead." "Yes," Ellie confirmed. "By my hand. He left me no choice." Davidson studied her thoughtfully. "Mrs. Caldwell, I presume?" "Miss Mason," Ellie corrected firmly. "The marriage was forced under duress and never valid in my eyes or before any just law." Thus a hint of approval flickered in Davidson's expression. "Miss Mason, then. I'll need a full statement from you and from Major Holloway when he's able, as well as access to all evidence regarding the Willow Creek incident." "You'll have it," Sam assured him. "Every document, every testimony. Caldwell's crimes deserve to be known, to be remembered." "And what about his men?" Ellie asked. "Those who participated in today's attack?" "My deputies are already rounding them up," Davidson informed her. "Those who haven't fled, at least. They'll face charges for the attack on the church on Reverend Parker. Justice will be served, Miss Mason. I give you my word on that." For the first time, Ellie allowed herself to truly believe it might be over. The nightmare that had begun with her forced marriage, that had expanded to encompass war crimes and decades-old vendettas, was drawing to a close. Not neatly, not without casualties, but with the truth finally emerging into the light. "Thank you, Marshall," she said sincerely, "for coming so quickly, for believing us." Davidson nodded acknowledgement. "I knew men who died at Willow Creek," he said quietly. "Good men, their families deserve to know the truth after all these years." As the Marshall and Parker discussed next steps, Ellie returned to Sam's side. His color was better now, his breathing more regular. He would recover, she knew, and perhaps in the process he would finally find the peace he had sought for so long. "It's really over," she murmured more to herself than to him. Sam reached for her hand, his calloused fingers entwining with hers. "Not over," he corrected gently. "Just beginning." So, 3 days passed. The town of Redemption gradually returned to normal, though a tension lingered in the air. Caldwell's men had been rounded up, those who hadn't fled immediately after his death. Some would face charges for the attack on the church. Others were released with warnings. Frank Matthews, Caldwell's foreman, had disappeared. Whether fled or killed in the fighting, no one knew for certain. Sam remained at the trapper's cabin, recovering from his wound under Ellie's careful attention. The federal marshals had taken statements from both of them, as well as from Parker and various townspeople who had witnessed the confrontation. The evidence, Hargrove's journal, and the accompanying documents had been secured, copies made and dispatched to multiple authorities. The truth about Willow Creek would no longer remain buried. On the afternoon of the third day, Marshal Davidson returned to the cabin. Sam was sitting up in bed, his color much improved, though movement still caused him pain. Ellie was beside him, reading aloud from one of the few books they had found in the cabin, a volume of Emerson's essays that seemed oddly out of place in a trapper's dwelling. "Major Holloway," Davidson greeted him. "Miss Mason, I'm pleased to see you recovering." "What news, Marshal?" Sam asked, setting aside formalities. "The territorial governor has responded to our report," Davidson said, taking a seat at the small table. "He's commended your actions and promised a full investigation into Caldwell's business dealings. Quite a few people in high places are nervous, it seems." "As they should be," Ellie remarked. "Caldwell didn't build his empire alone." "Indeed not," Davidson agreed, "which brings me to the other reason for my visit." He produced an official-looking document from his coat. "This came by special courier from Washington. It's addressed to you, Major." Sam took the document with a puzzled expression. Breaking the seal, he unfolded the paper and read silently, his face growing increasingly stunned. "What is it?" Ellie asked, concerned by his reaction. "It's from the War Department," Sam said, his voice strangely hollow. "They've reviewed the evidence we sent regarding Willow Creek. They're officially clearing me of any wrongdoing in the matter. The attack on Caldwell's unit has been posthumously declared a legitimate military action based on the intelligence available at the time." He looked up, meeting Ellie's gaze with bewildered eyes. "They're acknowledging that the massacre was Caldwell's crime alone, that I'm not responsible." Ellie squeezed his hand, understanding the magnitude of this for him. "You never were," she said softly, "but I'm glad they finally recognized it." Sam nodded, still processing this unexpected absolution. For 11 years, he had carried the weight of those deaths, believing himself at least partly culpable. To have that burden officially lifted was almost too much to comprehend. "There's more," Davidson said. "The territorial court has declared your marriage to Caldwell null and void, Miss Mason. You're legally free, and as Caldwell died without legitimate heirs, much of his property will be sold at auction. However, the governor has determined that certain assets, specifically the mine where the evidence was found, should revert to you as compensation for your father's death and your own suffering." Now it was Ellie's turn to look stunned. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll use it wisely," Davidson suggested with a small smile. "From what I've heard, you've earned that and more." After the marshal left, a contemplative silence fell over the cabin. The rapid series of changes in their circumstances was almost dizzying, from desperate fugitives to vindicated heroes in the span of a few days. "What will you do?" Sam asked, finally echoing her earlier question to him. "With the mine, I mean." Ellie hadn't given it much thought. The idea of owning anything, let alone something as valuable as a silver mine, even one supposedly played out, was foreign to her. "Sell it, I suppose," she said after consideration. "Use the money to build something better. Something that helps people rather than exploits them." Sam nodded approvingly. "Your father would be proud." Would he? Ellie wondered aloud. "I'm not sure I knew him well enough to say, but I hope so. I hope in the end he was trying to do the right thing in his own broken way." Most of us are, Sam replied quietly, trying to do the right thing despite our brokenness. Ellie studied him, this man who had taken her in when she had nothing, who had taught her to defend herself, who had stood against evil despite his own wounds and doubts. A man who had nearly died to protect the truth. There was still brokenness in him, yes, but there was also a strength and integrity that shone through the cracks. Some succeed better than others, she said. The next morning, Parker arrived with a wagon. Sam was well enough to travel, though not yet to ride. They would return to his homestead, their homestead now, perhaps to continue his recovery away from the lingering tensions in town. As they prepared to leave, Davison rode up accompanied by a young deputy. He dismounted with the easy grace of a lifelong horseman, approaching them with a serious expression. "One last piece of business before you go," he said. "We found Matthews." Sam straightened, instantly alert despite his weakness. "Alive, barely," Davidson confirmed. "Tried to make it to the territorial border. Bullet wound festered. My men found him delirious with fever in a line shack 20 miles south." "Will he recover?" Ellie asked. "Doctor says he might with proper care, but that's not why I'm here." Davidson glanced at the deputy, who produced a folded paper from his saddlebag. Before he lost consciousness, Matthews made a confession. Not just about the church attack, but about Willow Creek. He was there, you see, a young sergeant following orders. Sam took the paper, unfolding it carefully. "He's corroborated Hargrove's account." "And more," Davidson said grimly. "Details Hargrove didn't include. Names of others involved. It seems your shot at redemption stirred something in him, Major. A desire to clean his own conscience before meeting his maker." Sam read silently, his expression growing more troubled with each line. When he finished, he passed the confession to Ellie. "Justice comes in unexpected ways," he murmured. "Indeed it does," Davidson agreed. "I thought you should know. The circle is closing. The truth is coming out, all of it. Those who died at Willow Creek won't be forgotten again." After the marshals departed, they finished loading the wagon. Parker took the reins, Sam and Ellie sitting in the back among their few possessions. As they pulled away from town, Ellie looked back at the church steeple rising against the blue sky. It had been less than a week since they had arrived desperate and hunted. Now they left, changed, wounded still, but healing, free. The journey to Sam's homestead was slow but peaceful. The desert bloomed around them, a rare spring flourishing after recent rains. Wildflowers dotted the landscape, splashes of color against the red earth and green cacti. Life persisting in the harshest of environments. "Reminds me of you," Sam said, following her gaze to a particularly vibrant patch of desert primrose. "How so? Beauty where you least expect it. Strength that doesn't make sense until you see it in action." Ellie felt warmth rise to her cheeks at the unexpected compliment. "I could say the same about this whole territory. And about you." Sam shook his head slightly. "Not me. I'm just a worn-out soldier who finally found the right battle to fight." "You're more than that," Ellie insisted. "You're the man who saved me, who helped me save myself." Parker, overhearing, glanced back with a knowing smile but said nothing. Some truths didn't need witnesses or validation. They simply were. As the wagon crested the final ridge, Sam's homestead came into view. The small cabin sat unchanged, the corral empty, without their horses, which had been left behind in their flight. The land around it stretched vast and open, harsh but honest. "Home," Sam said quietly, the word carrying a weight it hadn't before. Ellie nodded, feeling the truth of it settle in her chest. Home. Not the end of their story, but the beginning. Whatever challenges lay ahead, and there would be many in this unforgiving land, they would face them together. Two damaged souls who had found in each other not completion, but complement. Not healing exactly, but the strength to heal themselves. As Parker brought the wagon to a halt before the cabin, a hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals with effortless grace, free and wild, but purposeful, like the justice they had fought for, like the truth that had finally emerged from darkness, like the blood that had spoken at last, demanding to be heard. The first week at Sam's homestead passed in a blur of healing and rebuilding. Parker stayed for 2 days, helping with necessary repairs to the cabin, which had suffered some damage during their absence. Caldwell's men had searched the place thoroughly, overturning furniture, breaking windows, and slashing Sam's mattress in their frustration at finding it empty. "Animals," Parker muttered as they swept up broken glass from the floor. "Destroying what they can't possess." Just things, Sam replied, surprisingly philosophical about the violation of his home. Things can be mended or replaced. And mend they did. With Parker's help, they repaired the windows, restored order to the cabin, and reinforced the door. The physical labor seemed to do Sam good, despite Ellie's concerns about his wound. The bullet hole in his side was healing cleanly, but she noticed how he winced when he reached too far or lifted something too heavy. "You're pushing yourself too hard," she admonished him on the third day after catching him attempting to rebuild a section of the corral fence alone. "Need to get it done before the horses arrive," Sam replied stubbornly. Marshal Davidson had promised to send their horses Willow and Sam's gelding once they were recovered from the church, where they had been left during the chaos. It was a kindness Ellie hadn't expected from the otherwise gruff lawman. "The horses can wait another day," she insisted, taking the hammer from Sam's hand. "Your health can't." He looked as if he might argue, but something in her expression stopped him. Instead, he nodded once and moved to sit on the porch, watching as she confidently took over the repair work. Her hands were no longer the soft, pampered ones of a town merchant's daughter. They were calloused, now capable. The hands of a woman who had learned to build, to defend, to survive. When Parker departed at the end of the second day, he left them with a Bible, fresh supplies, and a promise to return within the week. "Town's still unsettled," he reported. "Caldwell's death has created a power vacuum. Men who once worked for him are turning on each other, trying to claim pieces of his empire." "Any threat to us here?" Sam asked, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver he still wore even around the homestead. Parker shook his head. "Not directly. Most know better than to cross the man who stood against Caldwell. And Davidson's men are keeping the peace for now." After he left, a quieter rhythm established itself. They worked side by side during the day, Ellie tending the small garden behind the cabin, Sam carefully repairing tools and furniture when he wasn't resting. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of fire and gold. Sometimes they talked, sharing stories from their lives before. Sometimes they simply sat in companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. It was during one such evening, a week after their return, that Sam finally asked the question that had been hovering between them. "Are you happy here, Ellie?" She looked up from the shirt she was mending, surprised by the directness of the question. Sam's face was half in shadow, the setting sun highlighting the silver in his beard and the weathered lines around his eyes. There was vulnerability there that she rarely saw a man who had lost everything once afraid to hope for too much now. "Yes," she answered simply. "I am. It's a hard life," he continued, his gaze moving out to the horizon. "Lonely, far from town, from other people. A young woman like you might want more." Ellie set aside her sewing, considering her words carefully. What would more be, Sam? A life in town under the constant scrutiny of people who stood by while Caldwell hunted us. A return to the East, to a society that values women only as decorative possessions. She shook her head. "I've had enough of other people's expectations." She moved her chair closer to his, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Here I'm free. Here I've found strength I never knew I had. And here," she hesitated, then pushed forward, "here I've found you." Sam's breath caught audibly. His hand resting on the arm of his chair twitched as if he might reach for hers but didn't quite dare. "You deserve better than a broken-down old soldier," he said softly. "Maybe I don't want better," Ellie replied. "Maybe I just want you." The words hung in the air between them, honest and unadorned. Sam turned to her, finally the dying light catching the moisture in his eyes. "I've been alone a long time, Ellie. I'm not sure I remember how to be anything else." "Then we'll learn together," she said, and this time she did reach for his hand. His calloused fingers wrapped around hers, tentative at first, then with growing certainty. They sat that way until the stars emerged, twin constellations of hope in a sky that had seen too much darkness. The sound of approaching riders woke them before dawn. Sam was on his feet instantly, revolver in hand, the soldier's instincts that never quite left him. Ellie, who had taken to sleeping on a pallet near the fireplace while Sam used the bed during his recovery, rose almost as quickly. "Stay inside," Sam instructed, moving to the window to peer through the darkness. "Davidson," he reported with relief, recognizing the marshal's distinctive silhouette even in the pre-dawn gloom. "And he's brought our horses." They met the marshal outside. Davidson was accompanied by a young deputy and a ranch hand leading Willow and Sam's gelding on long reins. The animals looked well cared for, their coats brushed and gleaming, even in the faint light. "Marshal," Sam greeted him. "Didn't expect you so early." "Didn't expect to be here," Davidson replied grimly. "But we've got trouble brewing." Ellie felt her stomach tighten. "What kind of trouble?" "Frank Matthews died last night," Davidson said without preamble. "Fever took him despite the doctor's best efforts. But before he went, he had a visitor. James Sheridan." "The sheriff?" Sam asked, his expression darkening. "Former sheriff," Davidson corrected. "I've suspended him pending investigation of his ties to Caldwell, but he's still got influence in town, and whatever Matthews told him has got him riled up." The marshal's eyes moved between them. "He's gathering men, former Caldwell loyalists mostly, talking about revenge." "Revenge for what?" Ellie asked, though she already knew the answer. "For Caldwell's death, for the slander against his name." Davidson sighed. Sheridan was more than Caldwell's puppet. They were friends and fought together in the war. 5th Tennessee, Sam guessed. Davidson nodded. "He wasn't at Willow Creek, was recovering from wounds further east. But he's been with Caldwell since they came west. And he's not taking his friend's death or your revelations well." "How many men does he have?" Sam asked, his tactical mind already assessing the threat. "Moss. 15, maybe 20. Not all are fighters, but enough to cause trouble." "Are they coming here?" Ellie asked, her hand unconsciously moving to the revolver she now kept at her side even in sleep. "Not yet," Davidson assured her. "Sheridan's smart enough to know a direct assault on your homestead would bring the full force of federal law down on him. But he's spreading poison in town, claiming the evidence was forged, that Caldwell was murdered in cold blood, that you," he nodded to Sam, "are the real war criminal trying to cover your tracks." "Hardly anyone who was there would believe that," Sam said. "No," Davidson agreed, "but not everyone was there, and some who were might be persuaded to remember things differently if enough money changes hands." He leaned forward in his saddle. "I'm not saying you're in immediate danger, but you should know what's brewing." "Appreciated," Sam said sincerely. "Anything else we should know?" Davidson hesitated, then continued. "There's talk about the mine, the one that's been transferred to Miss Mason's ownership. Sheridan's claiming Caldwell had a legitimate partnership agreement with Hargrove that supersedes any territorial ruling." "That's absurd," Ellie protested. "Hargrove died under suspicious circumstances, and the mine came into Caldwell's possession through dubious means at best." "I'm not saying he's right," Davidson clarified, "just that he's making noise. Legal noise, and in these territories, possession often counts for more than paper." "Are you suggesting Sheridan might try to seize the mine?" Sam asked. "I'm suggesting you might want to secure your claim more firmly," Davidson replied. "The mine hasn't been worked in years, supposedly played out. But if Caldwell kept ownership of it even after it stopped producing, maybe there's more there than meets the eye." After the marshal departed, Sam and Ellie stood in the growing light, watching as the sun crested the eastern mountains. The horses, released into the corral, nickered softly as they reacquainted themselves with their home. "What do you think?" Ellie asked finally. "About the mine, about Sheridan?" Sam considered the question, his face grave. "I think Davidson wouldn't have ridden all this way just to warn us about legal wrangling. He suspects Sheridan's planning something more direct. An attack? Maybe not on us, not here," Sam replied. "But the mine, that's more vulnerable and more valuable, potentially." Ellie nodded slowly. "We should go there, see what's actually in that mine beyond Hargrove's hidden evidence." Sam studied her face. "It could be dangerous. If Sheridan's men are watching the mine, then we'll be careful," Ellie said firmly. "But I won't be bullied out of what's rightfully mine. Not by Caldwell, not by Sheridan, not by anyone." A smile touched Sam's lips, pride and something deeper lighting his eyes. "When did you get so fierce?" "I had a good teacher," she replied, returning his smile. "A man who showed me that sometimes you have to stand your ground." They decided to ride a boat the next day. Sam's wound was healing well enough for the journey, and Davidson's warning had created a sense of urgency neither could ignore. They spent the rest of the day preparing, checking their weapons, packing supplies, planning their approach to the mine. "We'll come in from the north," Sam decided, sketching a rough map in the dirt outside the cabin. "Less visible, more cover. If anyone's watching, they'll expect an approach from town." Ellie nodded, absorbing his tactical thinking. In the weeks since she had fled Caldwell's ranch, she had learned more than how to shoot or ride. She had learned how to plan, how to anticipate threats, how to survive in a world that often seemed determined to crush her. That night, as they sat by the fire finishing their preparations, Sam grew unusually quiet. Ellie watched him as he meticulously cleaned his revolver, his hands moving with the practiced efficiency of a man who had performed this ritual thousands of times. "You're worried," she observed. Sam didn't deny it. "Not about the mine, about what comes after." "What do you mean?" He set the weapon aside, meeting her gaze directly. "This territory's changing, Ellie. Men like Caldwell, they're dying out. Laws coming civilization. It's good necessary, but it means choices for people like us." "What kind of choices?" "Stay and adapt or move on." His eyes returned to the fire. "I came west to escape, to hide from what I'd done, what I'd lost. But now," he gestured vaguely, encompassing the cabin, the homestead, her, "found reasons to stay, to build something." "But," Ellie prompted gently, sensing his hesitation, "but I'm not sure I know how anymore." The admission seemed to cost him words dragged from a place deep within. "I've spent so long just surviving, just getting through each day. The idea of a future, of planning for something more." He shook his head. "It scares me more than Caldwell ever did." Ellie moved to sit beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "It scares me too," she confessed. "All my life, my future was decided by others. My father, then Caldwell. The idea that I get to choose now, it's terrifying. What if I choose wrong?" Sam's hand found hers, his calloused fingers intertwining with her own. "Then we choose again," he said simply. "Together." The word hung between them, full of promise and possibility. Together. Not alone, not anymore. Whatever came next, Sheridan, the mine, the changing territory, they would face it as they had faced Caldwell. Side by side. They departed at first light, riding north before circling east toward the Hargrove mine. The journey was slower than their previous visit, both to spare Sam's still healing wound and to allow them to approach more cautiously. By mid-afternoon, they had reached the ridge overlooking the mine entrance. Sam signaled for them to dismount, tethering the horses in a small grove of cottonwoods. They proceeded on foot, moving carefully from cover to cover as they surveyed the area. "Tracks," Sam murmured, kneeling to examine the hard-packed earth near the mine entrance. "Recent, several men, horses, and a wagon." Ellie felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cooling air. "Sheridan's men." "Maybe." Sam's eyes narrowed as he studied the surrounding rocks. "No one visible, but that doesn't mean they're not here." They approached the mine entrance cautiously, weapons drawn. The wooden support beams looked different from their last visit, newer, reinforced in places. Someone had been working here and recently. "They've been improving the infrastructure," Ellie observed. "Why would they do that for an abandoned mine?" "Because it's not abandoned," Sam replied grimly. "Hasn't been for some time." They entered the main tunnel, moving slowly, alert for any sign of danger. The air smelled different, less stale, more disturbed. Their lantern illuminated fresh boot prints in the dust tool marks on the walls, even a discarded tobacco pouch. "Caldwell was working this mine secretly," Sam concluded. "Probably using men he trusted completely." But why, Ellie wondered. If the silver was played out, they had reached the junction where they had found Hargrove's hidden evidence. Sam held the lantern higher, illuminating a tunnel that branched off to the right, a tunnel they hadn't explored on their previous visit. It showed signs of recent activity, fresh pick marks on the walls, a wheelbarrow half filled with ore. "Let's find out," Sam said, leading the way down this new passage. The tunnel descended gradually, the air growing cooler and damper. They had gone perhaps 100 yards when the passage widened into a larger chamber. Sam raised the lantern, illuminating a scene that answered Ellie's question immediately. The chamber was a hive of activity, or had been until very recently. Mining equipment was scattered throughout, along with stacks of raw ore waiting to be processed. But it wasn't silver they were looking at. The distinctive yellow gleam was unmistakable. "Gold," Ellie breathed. "Caldwell found gold." "A new vein," Sam agreed, examining the chamber. "Running deep by the look of it. Rich, too." That's why he kept the mine, Ellie realized. Even after the silver played out, he must have discovered the gold and decided to work it secretly. "Avoiding taxes, avoiding partners, avoiding questions about his sudden new wealth," Sam added. "Classic Caldwell. Always a scheme, always a secret." They explored further, finding a smaller tunnel that led to what appeared to be a makeshift office, a desk, some chairs, a cabinet filled with ledgers and maps. These might tell us exactly what Caldwell was up to, Ellie said, examining one of the ledgers. Production figures, shipment dates. This is a complete record of an illegal mining operation. Invaluable evidence against anyone still involved, Sam noted, including, I'd wager, Sheriff Sheridan. A sound from the main tunnel froze them both, the distant echo of voices, the scrape of boots on stone. "We're not alone," Sam whispered, extinguishing their lantern. "Back the way we came quickly." They moved silently through the darkness, Sam leading the way with one hand on the wall and the other holding his revolver. The voices grew louder as they approached the junction. "Telling you Sheridan wants it cleared out tonight," a gruff voice was saying. "Everything valuable loaded in the wagons. We burn the rest." "Seems a waste," another voice replied. "Mine's still producing." "Why not keep working it?" "Because it ain't ours no more, you idiot. Legally belongs to that Mason woman now. Sheridan's got a plan to deal with her, but meantime we take what we can." Sam and Ellie exchanged glances in the darkness. Sheridan's plan was becoming clearer. Strip the mine of its wealth, destroy the evidence of Caldwell's illegal operation, then deal with the legal owner. Deal with her could only mean one thing. They reached the junction just as lantern light appeared from the main tunnel. Trapped between the approaching men and the gold chamber behind them, they had nowhere to run. "There," Sam whispered, pointing to a narrow crevice in the rock wall, a natural formation barely visible in the dim light filtering from the approaching lanterns. "Hide." "What about you?" Ellie hissed. "I'll draw them away. Give you a chance to get out. Get to the horses." "No," Ellie refused. "We stay together." The approaching footsteps grew louder. There was no time to argue. Sam pushed Ellie toward the crevice, his eyes reflecting the distant lantern light. "Trust me," he murmured. "I'll find you." Before she could protest further, he moved away from the crevice, deliberately making noise as he retreated down another tunnel. The approaching men immediately gave chase, their shouts echoing through the mine. "There, someone's in here! Get him!" Ellie pressed herself deeper into the crevice, her heart pounding as the men rushed past, following Sam's deliberate trail. She counted 5 of them, all armed, all focused on the intruder they detected. When their footsteps had faded, she emerged carefully. She had 2 choices: follow the men pursuing Sam, or follow his instructions and get to the horses. Her instinct was to go after him to help him fight. But that wasn't the smartest move. Sam was right, someone needed to escape to warn Davidson to stop whatever Sheridan was planning. With a silent prayer for Sam's safety, Ellie made her way toward the mine entrance. She moved cautiously, gun drawn, alert for any sign of more of Sheridan's men. The main tunnel seemed clear, but as she approached the entrance, voices outside made her freeze again. "Wagon's almost loaded," someone was saying. "Tell Jackson to hurry it up. We need to be back in town by midnight." "What about the others, the ones chasing that intruder?" "They'll catch him or they won't. Either way, we've got our orders. Burn everything, leave nothing behind." Ellie peered carefully around the edge of the entrance. 2 men stood beside a large wagon already half filled with equipment and what looked like sacks of ore. Another man was unloading barrels from a second wagon, kerosene by the smell of it. They were preparing to destroy the mine, and with it any evidence of Caldwell's illegal operation. And potentially Sam, if he was still inside. She had to act, and quickly. But how 3 armed men against one with potentially more nearby? The odds weren't good. She needed a distraction, something to draw them away from the entrance long enough for her to reach the horses. Her gaze fell on the kerosene barrels. A dangerous plan formed in her mind, dangerous but possibly effective. Moving back into the tunnel, she retrieved a discarded miner's lamp and matches from a shelf. Carefully, she positioned herself just inside the entrance, out of sight, but with a clear view of the barrels. Taking a deep breath, she struck a match and lit the lamp. Then, with all her strength, she hurled it toward the kerosene barrels before ducking back into the tunnel. The explosion was immediate and devastating. The force of it shook the mine entrance, sending dust and debris raining down. Shouts of alarm and pain followed along with the frantic whinnying of horses. Ellie waited only seconds before risking a glance outside. The area was in chaos, one wagon fully ablaze, the men scrambling to control their panicked horses. Taking advantage of the confusion, she slipped out of the mine entrance and made for the cottonwood grove where they had left their mounts. She had almost reached it when a shot rang out, the bullet splintering bark inches from her head. Dropping to the ground, she rolled behind a boulder, returning fire as one of Sheridan's men staggered toward her, his face blackened by smoke, but his aim deadly accurate. "You," he snarled, recognizing her. Caldwell's whore. Ellie said nothing, conserving her breath and her focus for the fight. She fired again, catching the man in the shoulder. He spun, but didn't fall, using a tree for cover as he continued his advance. She was pinned down, the horses tantalizingly close but unreachable while under fire. And worse, the sound of gunfire would soon bring the others, both those outside who had survived the explosion and those inside who had been pursuing Sam. "You're dead," the man called, his voice ragged with pain and fury. "Sheridan wants you alive, but I'll tell him you didn't give me a choice." "Funny," a familiar voice replied from behind him. "I was about to say the same thing." Sam stood there, his revolver pressed against the back of the man's head. Despite the dirt and blood on his face, his aim was steady, his expression coldly determined. "Drop it," he ordered. The man hesitated, calculating his odds. Sam cocked his revolver, the sound unmistakable in the sudden silence. "I won't ask twice." The gun clattered to the ground. Sam's eyes met Ellie's across the clearing, a silent question. She nodded, rising from her cover and moving quickly to secure the man's weapon. "The others?" she asked. "Won't be joining us," Sam replied grimly. "At least not the ones who followed me." "The explosion?" "My doing," Ellie admitted. "I needed a distraction." A ghost of a smile touched Sam's lips. "Effective." The man between them spat on the ground. "You're both dead anyway. Sheridan's got 20 men. He knows what you did to Caldwell. He'll hunt you down like dogs." "Sheridan's the least of your problems right now," Sam informed him coldly. "You're going to tell us exactly what he's planning, or you'll join your friends back in that tunnel." "Go to hell." Sam's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did, a hardness, a darkness that made even Ellie shiver. "I've been there," he said softly. "I'm not eager to return. But you're standing at the gates right now, your choice which way you go." The threat hung in the air, charged with the knowledge of what Sam was capable of when pushed. The man must have seen it too, for he swallowed hard, his bravado faltering. "Sheridan's planning a takeover," he said finally. "Tonight. The whole town. Starting with that preacher who helped you, then the telegraph office, then the marshal's office. By morning, redemption will be his, and then he's coming for you." Sam and Ellie exchanged glances, the implications clear. This wasn't just about revenge for Caldwell's death or covering up the illegal mine operation. This was a coup, a violent seizure of power that would undo everything they had fought for. "How many men does he have exactly?" Sam demanded. "And where are they now?" 20, like I said. Most are in town already waiting for the signal. Some of the miners, some hired guns from over the border. Sheridan's been planning this since Caldwell died, gathering men, stockpiling weapons." "And the signal?" Ellie pressed. The man's eyes shifted, suddenly wary. "Midnight, church bells." Sam's jaw tightened. "Parker." He turned to Ellie. "We need to warn him, warn Davidson." "Already too late," the man said with a cruel smile. "Marshall rode out this morning, won't be back till tomorrow. And the preacher," he laughed. "Sheridan's got something special planned for him." Ellie felt cold dread spreading through her chest. Parker alone at the church, unaware of the danger approaching, and Davidson miles away, unable to bring help in time. "We need to go," she said urgently. "Now." Sam nodded, his decision already made. "Tie him up," he instructed, handing Ellie a length of rope from his saddlebag. "We'll take him with us, as far as the ridge, leave him there." "You can't stop this," the man called as Ellie bound his hands. "Sheridan's got the town sewn up tight. You ride in there, you're dead." "Maybe," Sam acknowledged, checking his weapons. "But I've faced worse odds." He glanced at Ellie, a silent question in his eyes. This wasn't her fight, not really. She could ride for the homestead for safety while he tried to save Parker and the town. But Ellie was already mounting her horse, her expression resolute. "Together," she said simply. Sam nodded, something like pride and something deeper lighting his eyes. Together. As they rode toward redemption, the setting sun at their backs, Ellie knew they might be riding to their deaths. Sheridan had men, weapons, and the element of surprise. They had only their courage, their skills, and the truth. But sometimes that was enough. Sometimes when blood spoke, even the most powerful had to listen.